Good afternoon. This is the House Judiciary Committee. It's the 11th of March. We have several bills and 68 witnesses, and we're going to start with Delegate Young. 1389. You'd like to bring up your panel, that would be fine. Eric Peterson is virtual. Eric Peterson? All right, we'll bring him on virtually, and then we'll hear from the person unfavorable as well. Delegate Young, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Judiciary Committee, Delegate Young again, and I promise for the last time this session, Mr. Chair, on House Bill 1389, Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act of Maryland. Now, I know this is not something that we normally talk about, but I hope that you all appreciate something a little different. Today we're going to talk about money. And not some of the normal stuff here in the Judiciary Committee. The purpose of the bill today is to establish the Maryland Bitcoin Reserve Fund as a strategic reserve asset. It allows the state treasurer to invest specific funds into Bitcoin and aims to diversify Maryland's assets as we look forward into the future. As you know, Bitcoin, as many of you may know, Bitcoin is like a digital gold in the economy. It hedges against inflation, and it is an appreciating long-term asset. Bitcoin's historic growth far outpaces many of our traditional assets and has that potential to strengthen Maryland's balance sheet. Maryland follows other states in considering this legislation and including the federal government and some foreign governments as well. Many major financial institutions are investing heavily into Bitcoin. So we have the potential to turn idle funds that may be on our balance sheets into assets that can grow significantly over time. The other thing that I want to make sure that I hammer for you all is that we have an opportunity to show leadership in the country. Maryland is a state where we've talked about wanting to be a leader when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to quantum, when it comes to innovation. And we're uniquely poised, if we move on this bill, to be one of those leaders. We have the opportunity to attract blockchain and financial tech businesses that create high-paying jobs. We will align with national and global trends as governments and, like I said, major financial institutions begin to do significant investment. We need growth here in the state of Maryland, and we need to examine each and every investment opportunity that may exist. And we heard over and over and over again that anything and everything is on the table, and that's why I put this bill in, so that way this also is at least considered, we can get a conversation started. And even if we don't make no significant movement this year, we certainly need to start thinking about what digital assets look like for our state in the coming future. Lastly, the bill does provide that the state treasurer will retain significant control, as he currently does, over what these investments would look like and what the safeguards need to look like. We will submit an amendment that will change the shall to a may, because we want to work with the treasurer and not necessarily force the treasurer to do certain things. And then we're also going to submit an amendment that would adjust where the funds come from, because basically it's a later bill, as you all can see. And as a result, I had to drop it pretty quickly. And I've learned since then that there's not a lot of funds where the bill currently seeks to bring funds in from. So with that being said, I've got a strong panel that really is full of experts that understand this in a significant way, and I urge a favorable report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Chair Clippinger, Chair Bartlett, and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Douglas Denard, a Maryland resident and digital asset consultant with nearly a decade in digital assets and over 20 years in capital markets. I'm here to support HB 1389, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act. This bill is a bold opportunity to secure Maryland's economic future, and I'm honored to share why it matters. Maryland faces budget shortfalls that strain education, economic development, food insecurity, public safety, courts, and infrastructure. Inflation and dollar debasement erode our purchasing power, and borrowing just delays the pain. HB 1389 offers a practical fix: the Maryland Bitcoin Reserve Fund. It lets our state treasurer, who is open to this, invest gambling enforcement penalties into Bitcoin, an asset that's grown from a niche idea to a multi-trillion-dollar global market. Bitcoin's track record speaks for itself. Let's look no further than the United States. Over the past decade, as to why strategy matters, the U.S. sold 195,000 seized Bitcoin for $366 million. If they held it, it'd be worth $17 billion today. That's the cost of strategy. From 2013 to 2023, its compound annual growth rate averaged 60%. turning $2 billion into over $219 billion during that 10-year period. For Maryland, a modest $2.1 billion reserve, 10% of the state of Maryland portfolio, 60% CAGR, compound annual growth, could be $230 billion in a decade. That would create more jobs, fund education, and empower small businesses with lower fees. Bitcoin industry events can boost tourism, putting cash in local economies. HB 1389 blends innovation with fiscal prudence, offering resilience and real income returns for Maryland. I urge a favorable vote with robust legal provisions, audits, limits to secure our future. Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, you're on now for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Eric Peterson. I am the Policy Director of Satoshi Action Fund. We are a nonprofit organization that works to educate and advocate on behalf of digital assets across the country. As you heard, Bitcoin is a digital asset with a market cap approaching $2 trillion, larger than the market cap of silver. We've worked across the nation to educate and advocate on behalf of these policies, and have introduced similar policies in more than 15 states, allowing states to invest in Bitcoin or hold Bitcoin through other means. States are already investing in Bitcoin, including the state of Wisconsin, which has invested more than $300 million of its pension system into Bitcoin, as well as Michigan and the state of New Jersey. HB 1389 is a well-measured approach to dealing with Maryland dipping its toes into the water to investing in digital assets. Rather than making allocations out of rainy day funds or general reserve budgets, the funding from this would come specifically from criminal asset forfeitures that would go into a reserve. Rather than being sold right at the time, as folks have said, they would hold Bitcoin for a period of time, allowing that growth rate to increase and eventually pay for other debt or programs down the line. This legislation is well measured. It allows the treasurers to work with qualified custodians, including Maryland banks, to hold onto these assets. Many treasurers already work with qualified custodians through bonds, cash, and other investments. This legislation is just a small step to moving Maryland to better understanding the power of digital assets in treasury management and moving funds around and eventually paying for important programs to the state of Maryland. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Delegate Schmidt?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill. I see just 2 hours ago that there was a bill at the U.S. Congress. How does this compare to that bill? Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar with the bill at the U.S. Congress. I'm familiar with the recent executive order from our current president. But again, I think it really speaks to the fact that this is something that's becoming more widely taken seriously by major institutions. And I think that as you see the United States government and other state governments take this seriously, it presents an opportunity. It legitimizes it, which at the end of the day is going to only serve to increase the potential valuation of the asset.
All right. Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a Bitcoin enthusiast, I'm happy to see you guys. You said that, was it the federal government or was it Maryland that seized the Bitcoin recently? And who said that? And I didn't hear what you said. What happened with
May I address that? Thank you for that, Chair Taylor. That was seized, but Delegate Taylor, that was seized by the U.S. The U.S. seized about 500,000 Bitcoin over the past 10 years, and they sold about 200,000.
So they've sold it?
They sold half. They now currently have about 195 to 200,000 that they currently hold.
So we have a model on the federal level of what can be done if you have seized Bitcoin and how that particular portfolio might grow over time.
Yes, ma'am. Exactly. At the time of seizement, it was valued about $366 billion. At today's current price, it's about $17 billion.
Thank you.
Delegate Moon?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Well, I wasn't going to ask a question about cryptocurrency, but I was scanning the news, and actually this Delegate Taylor's question was mine. Essentially, I don't know how much I would endorse us dipping into volatile risk at the moment, but, you know, as to seized assets, I wonder if you had considered that model, you know, just sort of retaining seized assets and not involving public money whatsoever.
Well, I think the conversation with the treasurer that I had and his team is that they are, at square one when it comes to even assessing this idea. And so I think part of their role is to assess risk on any asset class that we invest in with our public dollars and certainly with our pension funds. So, again, part of the goal is to get it started in the conversation with the understanding that we want to defer to their leadership when it comes to whether it's appropriate for public funds.
Oh, sorry, and again, I was simply asking about the federal model of building a fund off of seized assets solely. That's all. Thank
Sure.
you.
Delegate Conway.
Thank you, Delegate and panelists, for coming to testify. So if we use this model to seize these Bitcoins, would we use the coins to be leverage for funds, or would we lockbox them?
That's part of the conversation with the treasurer, I would say.
Okay.
There's nothing in the bill that seeks to lockbox. There are other pieces of legislation around the country that requires a certain amount of time to hold the asset, but we haven't gotten that deep into the
Or a certain
conversation.
value before the sell-off, like 50%?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Yes, sir.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you all very much. We have one person who's testifying against the bill, Jonathan Harris, virtual. All right. Jonathan Harris. Jonathan Harris. Connecting to audio. Jonathan Harris, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yes, go ahead for 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jonathan Harris. I'm here to testify in opposition to this bill. I'm a chartered financial analyst with about 28 years of experience working in quantitative finance and technology. Honestly, when I first heard of Bitcoin, I was somewhat enthusiastic. I thought it was a cool idea. But then as I looked into it, I found the things they were saying that the proponents were rooted in a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of deception involved, and it requires a huge amount of energy. It is a bad thing for Marylanders. Basically, the critical thing to understand about Bitcoin is this: it's how it makes money. There's only one way Bitcoin makes money, and that is these proponents keep recruiting new buyers. It's not quite a Ponzi scheme because you don't have the false financials, but it has that same return mechanism. Eventually, they'll run out of new buyers. I don't know when, but if Marylanders want to gamble that there'll be new buyers coming down the pike, they're free to do it with their own money. Bitcoin uses fancy tech as a veneer to sell people on it, but it's actually very inefficient as a money transfer mechanism. Most of the proponents you hear are talking about the technology in terms of, well, buy it now because other people are going to buy it. That's really what it is. And they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars to try to get the government to buy it for us and give them breaks from reg. Please don't expose Maryland to this toxic asset that Buffett called rat poison squared.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes testimony on House Bill 1389. We're going to skip 1248 as Delegate Warman is in a voting session and go to House Bill 1401. Delegate Fisher is here, and we will hear from him, please. Delegate Fisher has got a virtual, okay. The President of the Calvert County Board of Commissioners, Commissioner Hance, we'll have him come on as well.
Perfect.
Delegate Fisher, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the esteemed Judiciary Committee. Before you is House Bill 1401, titled Calvert County Commissioners, Prohibited Gatherings and Events. The bill allows the Calvert County Commissioners to authorize by ordinance the county attorney or the county state's attorney to prohibit a future event or gathering in the event the gathering has substantial likelihood of creating a nuisance or a disturbance of the peaceful enjoyment of private or public property. It's supported by the delegation, the senators, and of course, the Calvert County Commissioners, the state's attorney, and the Calvert County Sheriff. With that, be happy to take any questions once I think the county attorney testifies.
All right. Mr. Hance, please.
Vice Chair Bartlett and members of the Judiciary Committee. Buddy Hance is the president of our Board of County Commissioners, is presently in a legislative session with the board, so he was able to come today. I'm here to express their support for House Bill 1401. It grants local authorities the ability to take proactive measures to prevent gatherings that can result in disturbances, property damage, or other public safety risks. Our written testimony provides further detail. And for the reasons expressed therein, we ask the committee for respectfully request a favorable report.
There are questions? Delegate Moon.
Oh, boy.
Two for two, Mr. Chair, and I'll quote my seatmate and say, I don't mean to annoy you, but I do have questions. Are the types of events contemplated permitted events? Is that, or would this extend beyond events that are permitted by a county or municipality?
Go ahead, John.
These are for unpermitted events.
Unpermitted events.
Our experience has been they're typically advertised on Facebook, and they have a ticket. You have to purchase a ticket to find out the location, and those are either houses that are in the foreclosure process or have been foreclosed upon, or they're amenity rentals for the pool in the backyard. That's been our experience.
I see. Now, is the issue that they otherwise would be required to get a permit, or is there some hole in county law and procedure that makes this otherwise illegal gathering that we need to make illegal?
They're not getting a permit at all. They're basically renting a house for a short time from the bank, for example, while it's in foreclosure. That short time could be a month or 3 months. They're then selling tickets online to a very large event where hundreds of people come. There's a pool in the backyard. They're serving alcohol. So they're obviously violating the liquor license laws. But they're not getting a permit for all the obvious reasons. And so
and I guess if I can just be
this bill
specific.
contemplates the fact that they're not getting a permit. That's why it's necessary.
Okay, but the event is not otherwise legal anyway.
John?
The scale of the event does give the state's attorney the opportunity to use the provisions for a disorderly house after the fact. This legislation seeks to try and be more proactive and identify those situations in advance and take steps before the incident occurs.
So for example, when they're advertising online, Delegate Moon?
Yes.
That's the time then we'd like to stop it.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Delegate Boucher.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Delegate Fisher. Oh, you're full of smiles today. I am curious to find out that if Calvert County had its own independent government without county commissioners, would it be necessary to bring this bill before the entire General Assembly?
I'll let the county attorney answer that question.
Briefly.
Thank you for the question, Delegate. Likely not. They would likely be able to do this if they were charter form of government or code on rule, perhaps.
Thank you very much.
Delegate Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate. And I know this is a local bill, but some of the language is kind of broad, and it seems like this may create a challenge with some things that might be protected speech. I mean, could it be used for political rallies or public demonstrations or things of that nature?
Go ahead, John.
Certainly, and thank you for the question. Certainly wasn't intended that way. As enabling legislation, it's designed to have a local conversation through public hearing process, and certainly would have to withstand scrutiny in the courts, for sure.
Okay.
Delegate, have you requested a letter from the Attorney General regarding this legislation?
We have not. Be happy to do so.
It's okay, I have already. Anyone else? Delegate Kaufman?
Yes. Are you dovetailing a little bit on, it's nice to see you, Delegate, dovetailing a little bit off of Delegate Phillips's question, you know, someone's nuisance is someone else's political protest or First Amendment right. So are you at all concerned that that because people have multiple opinions, that this will lead to discord about what constitutes a nuisance or things of that nature?
Let's stay in the lane of what we're talking about here. We're talking about a house and a subdivision. And the subdivision the house was foreclosed upon, or the owner decided to rent the house for a few months. The persons who rented the house then decide to open up a club in the middle of the subdivision with hundreds of cars and people at the club and selling alcohol. And the county did not know this happened until after it happened, and then the neighbors call the local police, who then show up. And so this bill allows the county and the state's attorney and the commissioners to be more proactive to stop it. So this has nothing to do with speech. This has to do with public order and property rights, of course, of the local property owners in that community, and most importantly, public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, it also, the legislation allows the county or state's attorney to establish the penalty for violating this.
John?
Is that done anywhere else in the law? Or doesn't a legislative body have to set a penalty?
Thank you for the question. This draft of the bill does have a provision that says that the county would establish the penalties and enforcement provisions. We would be pleased with going forward in that manner, knowing that the 10-day misdemeanor $300 fine for a disorderly house doesn't have the deterrent effect that we'd like it to have.
All right, I see that part of it now. Delegate Grammer, and then Embry, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like if the committee is amenable to this bill, there'll likely be some amendments. Are you okay with working that out if the committee wants to take up the bill?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Foley has a bill that's attacking, I think, a similar problem, House Bill 87. I didn't know if you'd reviewed that. It seems to be just coming at it a different way without some of possibly the constitutional challenges, but you have not.
The only bill I've seen of Delegate Foley's is the leaf blower ban, so I haven't seen that one.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we thank you both very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1401. Thank you very much. All right. Oh, now the pages are leaving. Wait a minute. Are you taking the pages with you? We were going to welcome the pages to the committee. We were going to, no, you have to sit down now. I have that kind of power. You have to sit down now. It's like the Pied Piper. I understand. Don't follow that guy. All right. Very quickly, would you please introduce yourself, starting from my right to the left, and then we'll let you get out of here.
Okay, my name is Haley Smith, and I'm from Prince George's County.
Right.
My name is Nicole Philippe. I go to Harford County, and I attend Harford Technical High School.
Great.
My name is Mihika Lal. I live in Montgomery County, and I attend Poolsville High School.
Thank you.
My name is Emily Noonan. I go to Delaney High School in Baltimore County.
Baltimore County, all right.
My name is Louisa Depkin. I'm also Baltimore County, and I go to Lock Raven.
We welcome you all very much. We're moving you through a little quickly today, but we hope you have a good time here in the legislature with us. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right. The sun shines. House Bill 831, there's Carroll County delegation. Is that you, Delegate Rose? Here she comes. It is only Delegate Rose, and that is enough. So please, for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you. For the record, Delegate April Rose here on behalf of the Carroll County delegation. Our Carroll delegation voted unanimous on this particular bill, House Bill 831, and what it will do is expand the authority of our Carroll County government to conduct criminal history record checks for all prospective employees. Currently, our HR department may only request from the central repository a state and national criminal history records check for a prospective employee or volunteer if the position involved inspections, approval, or denial of permits, or any other grant of authority, work with the county commissioner's office, sheriff, state's attorney, circuit court, or county attorney's office. We would like this to be part of all of the employment process, and this would put us in line with Allegheny, Harford, Kent, Cecil, Caroline, Dorchester, and St. Mary's County. You should have in your packets a letter from our county commissioners and a delegation letter as well, and we would just ask for a favorable report.
Questions? No questions about charter government? Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 831. And now Delegate Rose has a bill in her own right, House Bill 1319. And it, again, it's Delegate Rose. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. Again, Delegate Rose here on behalf of House Bill 1319. The purpose of this bill came up over the summer, and what I would like to do, and certainly open to amendments in case it's too hard, but what I would like to do is have, the purpose is to take stolen points for large corporations, not small retailers, not small boutiques, not, Royal Farms and places like that, but for larger corporations such as Delta Airlines, Marriott, places where you accumulate a lot of points through American Express or other means. And what is happening, and this came to me from a constituent, is she went to book a flight. She did book flights on Delta Airlines, and they were subsequently, her tickets were canceled, all of her points disappeared, and it took a ton of time and a ton of work for them to finally come to the conclusion that these are being stolen and sold on the dark web. And the typical amount is around $5,000. So people can go onto the dark web. I don't know how you get on the dark web. I don't know anything about it. But apparently that's the going rate. And so the point of picking the amount, the $5,000, is because it would bring it in line with the initial felony of 5 years imprisonment or a $10,000 fine. So I don't know how easy it would be to find these people. The dark web is the dark web for a reason, but I think that there should be a strict penalty for theft of something of that nature, because a lot of us shop that way. A lot of us, save up our points for special vacations or things that are important to our families. And so I think that by bringing it in line to an initial felony would give it some teeth. So that's my story. Ask for a favorable report.
Questions? All right, no questions. We thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really, okay. That was House Bill 1319. Thank you very much. That concludes that testimony. Now, can I do it? Is there someone here from Delegate Wilson's office, Chair Wilson's office? All right, I need somebody here from there to do that. And at the moment, I need, I think, another delegate to, we've moved too quickly. Is Feldmark, is she here? Oh. Who wants to be a delegate? No. Who wants to be a delegate? What's your pay? All right. Hold on. We're going to go to House Bill 1150 as Delegate Martinez is imminently arriving. House Bill 1150, and we'll start to load people in here. So Kimberly Sayuardi, Mohammed Kadir, Joyce King is virtual, Mary Ella Jurdak. You can come on up. If I've called your name, you can come on up, but nobody's answering. Haven't had this happen so far this year.
You're not used to us.
I know, not used to us.
Does the monitor automatically change when you move up and down?
Yes. We could have asked the pages, we could get the pages back here, but we're not going to do that. Is Joyce King at least virtually? Not yet. Great. Really? Maybe, yes. Let's try this again. There he is.
Oh, there
All right.
All right. Delegate Martin.
Kimberly Sayuardi, Mohammed Kadir, Mariella Jurdak. Come on up to the table, please. Oh, good. All right, Delegate, you're going to settle in a second, and you're going to have 3 minutes, and then everyone else will have 2 minutes. And we have Joyce King, who is connecting, and she'll be available here in a minute. She'll get 2 minutes too. Delegate Martinez, please, for 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the Judiciary Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Ashanti Martinez, here to present House Bill 1150, Criminal Law Personal Identifying Information and Images of Individuals Dissemination Act. This bill seeks to establish clear penalties for individuals who engage in the harmful and increasingly prevalent act of doxing, the unauthorized distribution of personal identifying information when the victim is under the age of 25. At its core, this bill addresses a fundamental issue of privacy, safety, and protection from targeted harassment. In our digital age, doxing has become a powerful tool for intimidation, often leading to real-world consequences, including threats, harassment, and mental and emotional distress. Recent incidents, including one at the University of Maryland, underscore the urgent need for legislative action. In that case, a student's full name and place of employment were publicly exposed online without consent, leading to mass harassment, including death threats. Despite the severe persecutions, current law provides no direct penalty for individuals responsible for disseminating the victim's personal information, an unacceptable gap that House Bill 1150 seeks to close. More importantly, this bill does not criminalize free speech or public accountability. Rather, it ensures that individuals who weaponize personal information for the purpose of harassment, intimidation, or harm are held accountable for their actions. Existing laws on harassment and stalking often fail to address the role of the initial disturber or the initial distributor of private information, leaving victims vulnerable while perpetrators evade consequence. House Bill 1150 ensures that Marylanders, particularly young individuals who may be more susceptible to online targeting, are protected from this form of digital abuse. This legislation has garnered strong support from key stakeholders, including the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, CARE, who recognizes the urgent need to safeguard individuals from the malicious spread of personal data. By explicitly outlining doxing as a criminal offense, we take a firm stand against digital harassment and uphold the right to personal safety. For these reasons, I respectfully urge a favorable report on House Bill 1150.
Whoever would like to go next, please.
Do you want me to go? Yeah. Okay. Hello, my name is Mariella Jordak. I am here today in strong support of HB 1150. It's an essential bill that will provide much-needed protections for Maryland students and of truly all backgrounds against the deeply harmful practice of doxing. This is honestly a pretty common sense protection for students in our state and a practical evolution alongside the chains of social environments that technology creates, especially when it's used in nefarious ways. Doxing has become an increasingly dangerous tool for harassment, intimidation, and violence, and students, particularly those advocating for social causes or in underserved or marginalized groups, are especially vulnerable to targeted attacks attacks that expose their personal information online. I have personally experienced doxing for anti-racism advocacy work I've done as an adult, and while it was a truly frightening ordeal that still echoes through my life, I hope that a bill like this will continue to pave the way for some sort of justice for students, especially in light of how students are becoming targets of fascistic practices by our federal government and our executive branches. We need this step towards protecting our students here in Maryland. I urge you to prioritize student safety and find a favorable report for HB 1150. Thank you for your time and your consideration and for your efforts for making Maryland a safer state for all students.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Swarty. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Maryland Office of the Council on American Islamic Relations. CARE is America's largest Muslim civil rights advocacy organization. I also recently just graduated from the University of Maryland in College Park, and both as a CARE representative and a recent student and activist, I'm here today to express my strong support for HB 1150. This bill is crucial to protect our youth from the detrimental effects of doxing. In 2024, CARE Maryland received over 600 incidents and requests for assistance, and many of these cases related to students who were targeted in cyberbullying and doxing. Maryland currently has strong anti-bullying and cyberbullying laws, such as Grace's Law, but these laws are only applicable to minors. House Bill 1150 would extend these protections to students in colleges and universities. Our support for this legislation is inspired by a case that CARE received last December of 2 University of Maryland students who received death threats following a doxing attack. When our office contacted campus police for support, we were informed that there was nothing that they can do, and they directed the students to file a peace order in the courthouse. CARE is a strong advocate for First Amendment free speech rights, and we believe these have to be balanced with addressing threats to students' safety and lives. I urge you to support this bill to help protect people from being targeted, threatened, and silenced simply for existing and for expressing their beliefs. HB 1150 is a crucial step in ensuring that individuals have legal recourse against this form of digital harassment. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Dear Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, members of the Judiciary Committee, my name is Mohammed Kadir. This is my first time here, so thank you guys. Please give me a little bit of patience. I stutter a bit. I'm here today to express my strong support for HB 1150. I'm an employee of Johns Hopkins Medicine, but I'm here at my own capacity. I wanted to tell a quick story very quickly. I had a good friend named Suleiman. He was very interested in medical research. He still is. He very much is passionate about patient care. But if you looked up his name right now, the first website that would come up is Canary Mission. And you would see terrifying photos of this young student, details of what his career aspirations are, his LinkedIn, his Instagram, photos that try to paint him as a villain. And when Suleiman saw that, he tried to make jokes out of it, but his eyes screamed fear because he knew he wanted a career in medicine. For a lot of young students, this is a terrifying reality of a situation of if they tried to get politically involved, they're putting their careers on hold. They're putting their careers at risk. They're putting their lives at risk and their families at risk. Many of us are here because we're passionate. We cared. There was a moment in our lives that wanted us to give back to our communities, to give back to our kids, whether because of our grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, father, mother, kids, ourselves. We wanted to protect someone. I think this bill will give the opportunity not just to protect those kids in colleges right now, but the kids coming up, even maybe our children, as fathers, mothers, aunties, uncles, grandparents. Imagine if you looked up someone you loved and the first thing that comes up is not the awards and the great things that they've done for society, but rather a protest that they went to because of a cause that they were passionate of. We're all passionate about some cause, but imagine that passion being utilized and weaponized to go against you to further your education or further your career aspirations. Thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to talk, and thank you all.
Joyce King, please. If you'll unmute yourself for 2 minutes. Joyce King. Joyce is working on something else, apparently. It is wrapped in that. And Joyce King is up, figuring out that she needs to get on. Joyce King, please, for 2 minutes. Or not. No, she just muted herself again.
That space bar.
Well, we could spend all day doing this. Why don't we ask for questions? Joyce King?
Can you guys hear me?
Oh,
Okay. I'm
For
assuming
2
you can hear me.
minutes.
I can't hear anything that's happening, committee. But
2 minutes.
can I just get a thumbs up?
Go. All right.
Are they, can you? Okay, thumbs up. Hi, everyone. My name is Joyce King. I am here on behalf of the Maryland States Attorneys Association and the Frederick County Cyber Crimes Task Force here in Frederick County, Maryland. Currently in the task force, I've been doing cyber crimes for 12 years, and what we've seen is an absolute increase in this type of work. I know the other panelists very much focused on speech, free speech, and kind of different types of how this is being utilized to silence them. But what we're seeing in our lens is really power control, abusive tactics on juveniles, on young adults in relationships. My most recent case, I had an individual get angry at an ex-girlfriend and began posting her phone number and address and on various websites that were sexual in nature. And it was very difficult to find a statute that would really criminalize that type of behavior. There weren't any images that were being posted, so it didn't fall neatly into revenge pornography. It wasn't continuous behavior, so it was not harassment. So this is a great statute that can be utilized with regards to special victim crimes in our sector. So with that, we ask for a favorable report.
All right. Questions for the panel. Delegate Conaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate and panelists, for coming in to testify. To the person that spoke about being politically at risk from doxing, a lot of us here are political people, so we potentially get doxed all the time. And there's really nothing that we can do about that, but you didn't acknowledge that that's a part of the political career. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I'll bounce off of that a little bit. Thank you very much for your testimony, all of you. I think this is going to be for Mr. Martinez, for Delegate Martinez, because Ms. King is not available, or she can't hear us.
I see.
So public figures are in a different sort of bailiwick when it comes to the constitutional rights and privacy and being able to publish information. But what this says is that you can't intentionally disseminate somebody's name. So I worry that if you are, I understand the private information, so security numbers, credit cards, addresses, phone numbers, that's one thing. But if you can't publish somebody's name, or maybe likeness, then you might, and it says it shouldn't be construed to violate somebody's rights under the United States Constitution for the First Amendment. But my concern is that whether it's the press or non-press, if people can't disseminate information about somebody, aren't you violating the First Amendment right?
So that's a great question. I think what this bill is attempting to do is meet the realities of the world that we live in today. And I think there are a lot of instances where individuals might be engaging online but not have their actual name present for their own privacy and security, and someone identifying them and utilizing their real name to then instill fear or some type of harm to expose them for who they are, I think is something that we should address, or this committee should address. I'm open to amendments to make sure that we don't step on the constitutional rights if that's a concern for the committee they don't think the bill addresses. But I do want us to be realistic around what is happening. And what is happening is people are harmfully utilizing private or personal information on the internet to cause harm, with the intent to cause harm, to instill fear from individuals for a multitude of reasons. And as you heard from the state's attorney, there are gaps in our current practice to really help and protect people.
Is there an intent? Is there intent language? You have to, it's the intent to cause harm in this? I'm looking at. Yeah. So, with Grace's Law, we had, because they were children, there's special, the state of Maryland had a special interest. If you're 24 years old, you've graduated from college, and you're out there on a website and you upset somebody and they're then send something back, haven't you kind of put yourself in that situation on your own? Or,
All right, so the age of 25 was something that my office is kind of debating, because at first we simply said you could be in college, and we know some people take a longer time than others to maybe finish or come back, and so we didn't want someone out of the scope of what the intent was. The intent was to get college-age students, people who are really figuring things out. I'm only 28, so I'm still in that category, but I didn't want to do a bill that applied to me. I wanted to make sure that we got the younger folks who are really living and developing in an environment that's new and different from what most of us were able to grow and develop in.
All right, thank you.
And so that's the intent.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else? Seeing none. Thank you all very much, and that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1150. We're going now to Delegate Feldmark and House Bill 1164. She's going to be joined by Eric Tars, Michelle Zelaya, Joanna Diamond, and Jennifer Broderick, if they're here.
Thank you, Mr.
Several
Chairman.
of
I think a couple of them may be virtual.
Oh, right. Joanna Diamond should be virtual. Ms. Broderick is virtual. And Mr. Tars is virtual. All right, that's fine. So we'll hear from the five of you, and then we'll go on from there. So go ahead, Delegate Feldmark, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. For the record, I'm Delegate Jessica Feldmark, pleased to be here to present House Bill 1164. Before you hear from the rest of my panel, I just want to provide a little context around this bill. First, I think we can hopefully all agree that people experiencing homelessness should not be sleeping outdoors in public spaces. I think we have consensus around that. What this bill does is makes it clear that criminalizing homelessness is not the appropriate response to this problem. The fiscal note discusses the cost of requiring expanded support services. Let me be clear, this bill does not require counties or municipalities to provide any services or assistance to people experiencing homelessness. Now, I personally believe that that is the right thing for those jurisdictions to do, but they're not required to do that under this bill. We're not telling them what they have to do. We're simply taking one option, criminalization, off the table. Because a criminal justice response is not the appropriate solution for a social, economic, healthcare, and humanitarian problem. Treating homelessness as a criminal justice matter is both more expensive and less effective than offering more appropriate forms of help. And you will hear more about that from the witnesses on my panel, so I will respectfully ask for a favorable report and happy to take any questions.
Good evening, Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Michelle Zelaya, and I'm the Associate Director for Social and Economic Justice Issues at the Maryland Catholic Conference, and I'm here in support of House Bill 1164, which seeks to ensure that individuals experiencing homelessness are not penalized for the basic need to rest when no alternative shelter is available. Criminalizing rest does not solve homelessness. It punishes the symptom while ignoring the root causes. Rising housing costs, insufficient shelter capacity, and systematic inequalities. As the USCCB noted in their amicus brief in relation to the City of Grants Pass, the Church has long recognized the moral imperative to care for the poor and homeless, drawing on the example of Jesus, who had no place to lay his head, Matthew 8:20. Legislation that protects individuals from penalties for resting in public spaces when no alternative exists is a concrete step towards honoring this imperative. This brief also highlighted the disproportionate impact of anti-camping ordinances on vulnerable populations, including youth, people of color, and those with mental health challenges, groups already bearing the weight of societal neglect. Punishing them for resting in public spaces when they have nowhere else to go is not only unjust, but also perpetrates a cycle of poverty and exclusion. From a practical standpoint, the USCCB post-decision statement emphasized that fines and jail time do not address the homelessness crisis. They make it worse. criminal records, and financial penalties hinders individuals' ability to secure housing, employment, or stability, trapping them in a cycle of hardship. House Bill 1164 is an expression of mercy and justice consistent with the Catholic call to see Christ in the face of the poor. The USCCB witnessed in the grants passed reminds us that our laws. Thank you, and please vote for a favorable report.
Thank you very much. We're going to hear from the people who are on virtually now. We'll start with Ms. Diamond, please, for 2 minutes. Maybe we'll hear from Ms. Diamond for 2 minutes. Ms. Diamond? Oh, boy.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joanna Diamond. I am the Director of Public Policy for Healthcare for the Homeless here in support of HB 1164. Healthcare for the Homeless is Maryland's leading provider of integrated health services and supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness. We're serving about 11,000 people annually in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. And let's start with a shared understanding that no one wants there to be homelessness in public spaces, least of all those who are experiencing it. We know from our decades of experience that charging and arresting people and issuing citations is cruel, costly, and utterly counterproductive. Today, we engage people into care through the provision of outreach services under bridges and on park benches throughout our communities. We employ a mobile clinic, the Clinic on Wheels, that takes people out of 4 clinical spaces and out into the community. We are about to launch a street medicine program later this year where we take care directly to where people are. We know what works to stop homelessness. We know that effectively engaging trusting relationships can take months and even years, and those relationships can be damaged in about 5 minutes. This bill prevents that from happening. We know that it's the state's intent to have organizations like ours increase access to healthcare, increase access to addiction treatment, lower public costs, move people into housing. Arresting and ticketing people for sleeping outside makes all of that work harder. HB 1164 is hardly the solution to homelessness, but not passing this bill would make the proven solutions that we try to achieve every day so much harder to achieve. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we urge a favorable report.
Mr. Tars, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Delegate Feldmark and members of the committee. My name is Eric Tars. I'm here on behalf of the National Homelessness Law Center, supporting HB 1164 and the principle that everyone needs a safe place to live. A decade ago, I helped draft the model Right to Rest Act that HB 1164 draws from, because instead of focusing on real solutions to homelessness like housing and services, cities are passing harmful, expensive, and counterproductive anti-homeless laws. A new avalanche of more than 150 of these laws began last June after the Supreme Court ruled in the historic Johnson versus Grants Pass case that cities can arrest, jail, ticket, and fine people for sleeping outside, even if they have nowhere else to go. Now we hear that President Trump is planning a new executive order that would implement his campaign pledge to force unhoused people under threat of arrest into government-run detention camps. The legislation before you today could be key to ensuring Maryland residents who can't afford the rent don't end up in one of Trump's homeless detention camps. The fiscal note for this bill shares vague concerns for increased costs due to increased services necessary to address homelessness, but it does not account for the fact that addressing it through law enforcement is the most expensive approach there is. Law enforcement officers get paid more than social workers. That shouldn't be, but it is. So even if you think it's appropriate for untrained law enforcement to be doing outreach to homeless individuals, it still costs far more and will get far worse results. And jail is the most expensive form of housing there is, in Maryland costing more than $167 per night per person, meaning a week in jail could pay for a month in a studio apartment, and even many hotels would be cheaper. Every arrest means fewer resources for the actual solutions to homelessness and more barriers to the individuals on the streets to getting housing. Study after study has shown focusing on housing, not handcuffs, actually saves communities millions of dollars on criminal justice and emergency room costs. Let's help Maryland communities escape the costly criminalization trap. Pass HB 1164.
Right, now 2 minutes. Oops. Now 2 minutes, please, from Ms. Broderick, please.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Executive Director of Bridges to Housing Stability, testifying on behalf of Bridges. Bridges has been a Maryland nonprofit focused on preventing and ending homelessness through affordable housing solutions since 1990. We appreciate this opportunity to present testimony in support of House Bill 1164. The number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness is rising in Maryland. There has been a 106% increase in the annual unsheltered homeless count between 2021 and 2024, according to the HUD PIT counts by state report. The housing shortage is making rent unaffordable for low-wage workers, and eviction rates are increasing. At the last point in time count in January, I met a woman that slept on a lawn chair nightly near an intersection, not panhandling, just sleeping there because it was a place where she felt safe, where she could be seen and helped if anything happened to her. This is survival, not a criminal act. Bridges supports House Bill 1164 because shelter spaces are consistently full throughout the state, and individuals then have no choice but to sleep wherever they can feel safe. This act allows these individuals to have basic civil rights and prevents them from being fined, ticketed, and jailed for sleeping. Punishments only put more barriers, as you've heard from others today, to housing on these individuals, and it increases public costs to do so. As an organization focused on housing solutions and ending homelessness, we know that a majority of the people we rehouse already have many existing barriers to housing. Discrimination, racism, and a housing crisis are just the tip of the iceberg for these folks. Our state does not need to add more barriers. Instead, we should be looking for paths to access shelter and housing for these folks. There is no community in our state that could ever benefit from the criminalization of rest for our most vulnerable neighbors. We urge a favorable report on House Bill 1164. Thank you.
Questions for the panel. Delegate Kaufman.
Yes, very briefly, Mr. Chair. I like the bill very much, and I don't like the grand pass decision, so let me state that at the outset. But how does this pass muster with the grand pass decision? I can see it easily being challenged under the precedent established by the Supreme Court. So that question is for the gentleman on the Zoom.
Yes, thank you. So the Supreme Court was really clear that it was only saying that the Constitution does not provide a floor with the Eighth Amendment that requires communities to do this, but it was crystal clear it does not prevent them from taking this this kind of protective approach. The language is very clear. Nothing prevents states from not taking the criminalization approach. Only that the Constitution doesn't require them to do so.
Thank you.
Delegate Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. Obviously, this is a big problem that we face here in our state. Can you just give me a little clarity? What is, with this legislation, if it passes, what prevents this from criminal trespassing, right? So if you're homeless in your own folks' properties or such things as eminent domain, you're just going to set up on someone's property and assume housing.
So this deals with public spaces, providing that individuals can sleep in public spaces. They cannot block or deny access to private property.
Give me an example of what you consider to be a public space.
County road right-of-way, county parks, public land, publicly owned land.
Is this a public space where we're at right now?
This is a public space.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Delegate Tolles.
Thank you so much. Hi, Delegate Feldmark. I actually do like this bill. And so I just want to figure out how we can help, because I can understand. But yeah, I do think it's important to address this population. With that being said, MACO has did it unfavorable. Would you like to respond to that? And then my second question is, in terms of other testimony, I didn't see anything from law enforcement. Have you spoken with them, and can you offer to the committee some, information about what you discussed in terms of being able to monitor this as law enforcement?
Sure. So I do not have specific information from law enforcement, but I have had conversations with MACO, and I believe you'll be hearing from them directly shortly. And look, I am not surprised that MACO opposes this, right? It is limiting county authority. I do believe that, you know, most, if not all of our counties would agree that this is a problem in need of a solution. I think the challenge that we have is, and I think Mr. Tars spoke to this in his testimony, right, that the law enforcement response, the criminal justice response, is one that is may be seen as most expedient, but is in fact most expensive and least effective, right? And so what I think we want to do, and this is the conversation I had with MACO, right, is we want to make sure that counties are not wasting resources on approaches that are not helping fix the problem, right? So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
You will. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Delegate.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for being here today. As a previous county commissioner, we had a real issue in downtown Westminster with homeless addicts. We had calls from constituents, homeless people sleeping around, and leaving drug paraphernalia on the sidewalks. We were able to clean that up through law enforcement. Wouldn't this reverse our efforts to clean up our downtown area?
I don't think it would reverse the efforts. I think it would suggest that other efforts should be taken, that it's not necessarily a law enforcement response, but perhaps it's having social workers and outreach workers from nonprofits who are prepared to help homeless individuals with the services they need, with the treatment they may need to be connected to, and making sure that they're approached with the appropriate care and resources that they need.
Thanks for saying that, because we did a two-pronged approach. We did law enforcement, and we have a very active citizen services program. And the combination of the two is very successful for us. I'm just concerned that this would take away one of the components of making that happen.
Well, and I will say this, I think actually Ms. Diamond testified to this, right? What the nonprofits who really specialize in serving and helping this population and helping folks successfully transition out of homelessness have found is that law enforcement interaction is often counterproductive, right? That it can actually set that back. Now, this bill does not say law enforcement can't be involved or can't be present, right? I think there's a preference to limit that law enforcement intervention, but this is simply saying that, you know, that it can't be criminalized, right? That this can't be something that we take a criminal approach to.
All right, thank you very much.
Delegate witness to testify, came in to testify. If the homeless could be in the park after dusk, let's say, could the non-homeless be in the park after dusk, and could they be allowed to party and maybe smoke cigarettes and all after dusk?
This bill does not address partying or smoking cigarettes. It's about resting and sleeping.
So would the homeless be able to smoke cigarettes if they chose to while they were resting?
If smoking is prohibited in the area, this does not negate any prohibition on smoking or any other activity.
Okay, thank you.
Only sleep and rest.
Only sleep and rest. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We're going to go to other people who have signed up to testify on the bill. Rebecca Tercero from the Office of the Public Defender and Sharon Bala. Whoever would like to go first is fine. Go ahead for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Tercero. I'm a social work intern with the Maryland of the Office Public Defender. and I urge you to issue a favorable report on House Bill 1164. This bill protects people experiencing homelessness from being arrested for sleeping in public or in a legally parked vehicle. We are in support of this bill because it helps prevent the criminalization of people who do not have a home or a permanent place to rest. OPD represents indigent individuals across the state of Maryland, many of whom experience homelessness. Social workers within the agency join with defense attorneys to provide holistic representation by assessing the underlying causes of clients' behaviors and developing individualized recommendations for treatment. Individuals who are displaced are disproportionately vulnerable to arrest. When people don't have access to shelter, they can only rest in public spaces. Oftentimes, they rely on housing supports that are not always available to them. Think of individuals who stay in shelters overnight, but those shelters are closed during the day, times when beds are full for the evening, or when family members cannot provide consistent housing. Homelessness should not be a crime, and people experiencing homelessness should not be punished for their lack of access to shelter. Homelessness is a national crisis that we cannot jail our way out of. According to the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty, 74% of people who are homeless do not know a place where it is safe and legal for them to sleep. Restricting safe and legal places to be, including their car, increases incarceration rates and financial burdens rather than reducing crime or homelessness. It creates criminal records for an already vulnerable population, bringing greater challenges to securing housing, employment, and medical care, the very things they need to elevate them out of homelessness and involvement with the legal system. For these reasons, we support the Right to Rest Act and urge this committee to issue a favorable report.
Vice Chair.
Hi, thank you for coming in and testifying. Do you know anybody else who works at OPD who may be here today named Crystal Williams?
Yes.
Do you like working with her?
Yes, thank you.
Good job, good job.
Yes, she's very sweet.
It is possible that Ms. Williams revealed that this is your first time testifying before any committees in the General Assembly, and that you were perhaps apprehensive about testifying in front of us. And so
It's a very
you did okay.
great opportunity.
You did okay.
Maybe I'll do better next time.
Questions? Delegate Cardin.
I have about 55 questions. With 76 parts to each one. That's okay, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
concludes those people testifying in favor of the legislation. In opposition, we have Carrington Anderson. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Carrington Anderson with the Maryland Association of Counties, speaking in respectful opposition on House Bill 1164. MACO has similar concerns with this bill as we did on House Bill 487, which is the unhoused individuals bill. In addition to those concerns, this bill broadly preempts local governments from enacting or enforcing a local law that prevents an individual from things like resting or sleeping in a public place or sleeping in a legally parked car. Counties recognize and share the commitment to addressing homelessness with dignity and compassion, but the bill as drafted does present some concerns for counties, and we want to work with the committee and the sponsor, and for these reasons we would respectfully urge an unfavorable report.
Delegate Simmons.
Thank you. Can you tell me if, MACO, are y'all tracking any numbers pertaining around this issue of how many people we have in the state of Maryland that's facing homelessness or suffer from it?
Thank you, Delegate, for the question. Did you ask if we're tracking the number of people who are homeless in the
Yes,
state?
the amount, yeah.
I am not aware of that, but I'm happy to find out and ask.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Tolles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be quick. As a former council member for Prince George's County, I also chaired our health committee where we had all of the basically resources and programming, and that was the least funded committee. And that's generally speaking, people generally don't fund their health, education, and social services, right? So social services is one of the least funded throughout any agency, throughout any state or county government. Can you, and I think homelessness, and we had a lot of programs, but we do fall short sometimes as county, as a former county official, but even as elected officials trying to do the work of the people. So what I think the delegate is trying to do is to offer some other alternatives. It doesn't mean that you don't do those other social programs that are there, but you offer ways to decriminalize it. And we know that students, I've known students who've been homeless, parents sleeping in cars. And so can you further explain, how this, how you have an issue with taking, allowing the state to come in and put some policies in place that would decriminalize it, knowing that resources are limited in our county government?
Thank you, Delegate, for the question. And I guess from county's perspective, not trying to punish those who are homeless, but rather to ensure that these public spaces are safe. And I think that in some instances, enforcement actions can be a tool to point someone to a program that a county has. And again, we understand the intent of the legislation, and I think that separately we can work on things such as supporting affordable housing or different behavioral mental health programs. So happy to continue that conversation. I do appreciate the question.
And thank you so much. Yes, I speak from experience, and we also have veterans that sleep in the car. So I ask that you please work with the delegate, because we do have serious concerns, and mainly, especially we have a large veteran population in my county, and they do sleep in the car. And I think this is a good bill to decriminalize that, to not add any other issues on their record when folks are trying to, do what they can to get themselves out of a bad situation. So again, someone speaking from experience, I ask that you work with the delegate to try to see what you can do, because we want MACO to be partners, not be adversaries. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to follow up very quickly with what Delegate Toles just said. So you come in, not you personally, you did a very good job testifying, thank you. But MACO comes in every year on bills like this and says, we understand the problems and we want to work with the sponsor, and we'll continue to try and work. But rarely do we come up with a solution that says, here's what we can do to help with our individual jurisdictions and deal with this. Because clearly we have passion on the one side, the delegate, the social work intern. These people are testifying beautifully about how we want to help these people. And then MACO comes in and says, well, we'd like to work with them, but we'll talk about it next year. So I'm asking you, can you think you can come back maybe either over the summer or next year with some ideas on how we can deal with this?
Thank you, Delegate, for the question. Happy to talk about that with counties, and happy to talk to you offline if you want to show us a bill, and we're happy to run that by our legislative committee and to continue to talk about solutions, because I agree that it is a problem and do appreciate the question.
Great, thanks.
Don't see any other questions. Thank you very much. That concludes the testimony now for House Bill 1164, and we're going to go on now to Delegate Wilson's bill. The chairman is upstairs and is unable to come down. I think he sent down an aide. Yes, there we go. John Cox, Karen Morgan, and then virtually Sarah David and Joyce King. Okay. So if we could bring them up virtually, we'll hear from Delegate Wilson's aide, John Cox, and Karen Morgan. All right. If you'd like to begin for 3 minutes, please.
Yes. Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, and members of the committee, my name is Jenna Jacoby, and I am here to offer my strong support for HB 1425, criminal law, identity fraud, artificial intelligence, and deepfake representation, on behalf of Delegate C.T. Wilson. HB 1425 is a critical piece of legislation designed to protect Marylanders from the evolving threats of identity fraud in the age of artificial intelligence. The dangers of deepfake technology are no longer hypothetical. As these technologies become more sophisticated, so too do the potential harms they can inflict on individuals, businesses, and public trust. HB 1425 takes a crucial step in protecting Marylanders from these harms by criminalizing the fraudulent use of AI and deepfakes that are indistinguishable from an actual and identifiable human being. This bill modernizes Maryland's criminal laws to address gaps in our current statutes, particularly in light of malicious deepfake technology. HB 1425 explicitly prohibits the unauthorized use of a person's identity through AI and deepfakes to cause harm, whether physical, emotional, or financial. Furthermore, in a time when deepfakes can convincingly impersonate, prohibiting the use of AI or deepfakes to impersonate another with fraudulent intent is vital. This provision is necessary to combat the misuse of AI-generated content that can be used to defame individuals, falsify records, and cause harm through fraud, harassment, or intimidation. Last year, the principal of a Baltimore County public school was targeted in a deepfake audio recording that falsely portrayed him making racist and anti-Semitic remarks. This fabricated recording led to significant reputational harm and public outrage. Investigations revealed that the school's athletic director had used AI tools to create the deepfake. This case reflects the urgency for HB 1425, which allows victims to bring civil action. The bill's creation of a private right of action provides victims of identity fraud, like the school principal, an avenue for recourse while also deterring this behavior. Importantly, the bill ensures that civil penalties only apply to individuals who knowingly engage in fraud. This means innocent users won't be unfairly punished. The increasing prevalence of deepfakes and their potential to cause harm cannot be overstated. HB 1425 recognizes this urgency and takes decisive action to protect Maryland residents. It sends a clear message that the misuse of AI and deepfakes for fraudulent purposes will not be tolerated in our state. Simply put, the lack of AI regulation puts our consumers at risk and largely benefits bad actors. I urge the committee to favorably report HB 1425. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Whoever would like to go next, please.
Mr. Chair, if I can interject, and if the chair is willing, apparently Ms. King has to be somewhere else at 3 o'clock. Is the chair willing to have Ms. King go first?
That's fine. Ms. King, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Joyce King on behalf of the Maryland States Attorneys Association Special Victims Committee, asking for a favorable report. I wanted to take the opportunity, the few minutes that I have, to relay a very disturbing case that we had in Frederick County where 7 juvenile female victims were victimized by this type of behavior, and the current laws did not adequately really represent the harm done to them or their families. Their images and names were utilized AI and taken and put on various websites, pornographic websites, sexual websites, but the images themselves were not pornographic in nature, so we could not proceed under any type of revenge pornography or child pornography. We're seeing the proliferation of AI being used in this manner. For me, as being a child exploitation prosecutor, I have seen the utilization of AI taking real images of children and distorting them, not a sexual manner, but creating fake profiles to then further extort and sextort other children by creating these fake accounts, utilizing real victims' image and names. So with that, we ask for a favorable report.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Klimpinger, members of the House Judiciary Committee. My name is Karen Morgan. I'm a member of the Executive Council for AARP Maryland. We are here to testify in favor of House Bill 1425. AARP is very active in the fraud prevention space, and as a volunteer for AARP, I go around the state. I've been all over the state talking to different groups about fraud prevention and things that they can do to not be victimized. One of the questions that I almost always get when I talk to these groups, it's about the grandparent scam. What do we do about that? And for those who aren't familiar, the grandparent scam is simply where a criminal will at some point call or contact a person in some way and tell them that their grandchild has been arrested, their grandchild's been in an accident, or their grandchild is somehow in horrific trouble, and the only way to address that is to send money either by gift cards or wire transfer or some other way. I have personal experience with this because my own mother was victimized in this way. She was told that her grandchild was in danger, and she cashed a number of she bought a number of gift cards to try to solve this problem. Of course, it was a scam. She didn't know that. And unfortunately, she didn't lose a lot of money, but she lost enough. And I mean, $1 is too much. And then she found out from my brother that my nephew was fine, her grandchild was fine. These criminals these criminals weaponize our humanity. It is in our DNA to believe our eyes, to believe our ears, and they take that and they turn it in the most insidious ways against us. That's why we need a felony. That's why we need strong penalties to capture these people when we can. This is not acceptable. And so we would like a favorable report on House Bill 1425. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, members of the Judiciary Committee. I'm John Cox, Deputy State's Attorney for Baltimore County, and also speaking on behalf of the Maryland State's Attorneys Association in support of House Bill 1425. Our identity theft statute right now basically only applies to those who are seeking financial gain from another, health information, or to avoid their accurate identity when they're being arrested or prosecuted. It doesn't take into account those who may have injury caused to them or serious emotional distress as a result of the theft of their identity. It is our position that we need to get ahead of that, especially with the development of AI, and this bill addresses that. Ms. Jacoby, if I remember your name correctly, mentioned the case out of Baltimore County with the high school principal. I'm one of the prosecutors assigned to prosecute that case. I've had the opportunity to interact with that principal and learn how much incredible impact that has had on him and had on the community. We had to put police protection on him. The school was very seriously affected, and I spent I don't know how much time trying to find what crime could apply to what was done. But this was a situation where the person's voice was virtually indistinguishable to the ear, to that of the individual, and that they were making what appeared to be anti-Semitic and racist comments. It caused great distress. We haven't gone to trial yet, but that's something that we have to deal with. Imagine, if you can, a circumstance where somebody's able to use AI or some other means to replicate the voice of the governor or a mayor or a county executive, and then they put out a recording of that individual appearing to make anti-Semitic or racist comments, and then the civil unrest that could result of that, or as a result of that, and the potential for damage or injury or harm to the individual whose voice is being faked. This is something which must be addressed, and with this, I think this bill will do that. We ask that you support House Bill 1425.
It's David, who I think is on virtually. Sarah David for 2 minutes, please.
We're having just some technical, there we go. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Sarah David. I'm the Deputy State Prosecutor at the Maryland Office of the State Prosecutor, asking for a favorable report on HB 1425. We want to thank Chair Wilson for his leadership on this important issue. My colleagues have come to talk about case examples, so I just want to talk about our approach to coming up with this legislation. Several jurisdictions got together from the Maryland State's Attorneys Association to approach the challenge with AI and deepfake technology. And we looked at other states and found that by putting it in an identity fraud statute, we were really making sure that we were criminalizing the intent and modeled after another statute in New Jersey. So people can mock one another, they can make memes, the internet is full of fake images, but this holds people accountable for actually intending to make people think that it's real. We navigate intent in almost all of our crimes. And so it's important that the same way under the law now, I can't use your identifying information to get some type of benefit, but I could use it to say, send out an invitation. That's what sort of this would criminalize. We've worked with the Motion Pictures Association to ensure that First Amendment protections are in place, and you should have some of those amendments. Another very important part of this legislation I want to highlight is the injunctive relief. This is on page 7 of the legislation. It allows a victim to bring a civil action so that the court can issue an injunction. When it comes to AI and misinformation, the most important step is often to stop the distribution. And that's what this would do. We urge a favorable report on this legislation. Thank you very much.
All right, are there questions for this panel? Delegate Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the panel. I was just trying to get an understanding with this legislation. Does this affect the Federal Communication Commission, and how could they also assist with enforcement of this?
So I'm happy to. I'm happy to answer. I don't think that this would. So we have certain legislations. We have like the TCPA and other types of things that deal with fake calls and other things that are regulated by the FCC and also regulated by the state. I think what we would have here, though, is actual identity fraud. And so there would be certainly times when, there would be other regulatory information involved, but this would be an individualized intent. And so I think that it would be separate and apart. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry, the sponsor is not here because I'm not sure if one of the prosecutors was involved in the drafting of this or not. But I guess the question I have is, most of the bill is clear to me, but I'm trying to harmonize this one with some of the other deepfake bills we heard this year and last year. And so my question is whether you intend or do not intend this bill to cover the sexual deepfakes, or are you really just looking at, the sort of Pikesville impersonation scenarios?
So go ahead, Mr. Cox.
No, I was throwing to you already.
Oh, okay. So we sort of had worked on drafting this bill, and the idea is that this bill would have an identity fraud component. I think some of the other things that are going on with deepfake and AI technology has to do with its creation, how it's created, how it's distributed, all of those things, which could be separate. And as everyone's aware, this is the forefront, right? Like, this is what we're now seeing as criminal actions that our laws don't address. So we are going to see different facets of the law. And so I think that there are still going to be civil actions and other types of things related to deepfake on revenge porn and other things. But this would address if the intent was to make people think it was the person, and could certainly be applicable to some of those revenge porn images. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I guess. And the reason why I harp on this seems pretty clear as to the Pikesville example. But one of the other bills has a civil defamation remedy for deepfake pornography. And this one has, it seems like, injunctive relief maybe for that scenario. But the third thing I would note on this one is that one of the prongs is that you have to have an intent to harm. And again, in the Pikesville scenario, I think you would clearly meet that prong. But in a deepfake pornography scenario, I think it might depend on the facts, whether they were intending harm or not. So I just throw that out there for consideration.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have two quick questions. First is for Ms. David. It looks like the motion picture industry put some amendments in their testimony, and that's what you've included in your amendments with the sponsor.
So we've worked out, I don't know exactly what's in their testimony because I haven't seen it, but we have worked out amendments. I think they're here to testify and will explain which ones that they support, but we have been talking to them about that.
And then, thank you for Mr. Cox. The example that you gave, which very close to home for me, in Pikesville, there's been a question as to the harm that this has caused other people who were not participating or specifically implicated in the deepfake, but they were tangentially harmed. Do you think that this proactive measure will help, for example, all the students who had problems with trusting authority figures and then finding out that the ones that they thought they were trusting, they shouldn't have trusted, and the ones that they thought they shouldn't have trusted, or they were told not to trust, were the ones that they should have trusted. And in the end, there was a whole year of students who really were very much harmed. Is this proactive measure going to hopefully help all those tangential victims?
I mean, I certainly hope that by what I hope is a successful prosecution, that will be one step. I don't know that we could find a way to criminalize that extensive harm beyond the individual that is particularly harmed. As you know, however, if the prosecution in this particular case is successful, that's information that can be brought to a judge's attention in terms of the widespread affect that this person's actions had in determining what an appropriate sentence ought to be.
Thank you.
Delegate Pasteur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cox, also, this is very close to home because I was a school board person over that school. So this is my question to you. Will this cover not just protection from or as a result of the main person, but there were others, or at least one, who also supported what was done to the principal. So will this extend beyond the person who actually did this, who put it together?
If we're using this particular case as a almost hypothetical, the issue there would be proving their knowledge, that there was a fraudulent intent to it. And that would be very difficult for me to do in what I've been able to assess on this particular case. However, I mean, if you have a circumstance where somebody, although they may not be the actual creator of the AI, but were active participants in the action, then they are aiding and abetting and therefore criminally responsible.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Cox. Are you, without revealing anything that you shouldn't reveal, are you pulling in the federal government at all to help with the vice principal or the principal situation under the TCPA?
I have to confess, I don't know what the TCPA is, but we did interact with the federal government in terms of looking at whether or not there was the possibility of federal prosecution for that. Their only option was a cyber stalking.
Well, I'm looking at it and it says, and this, I guess this is for Ms. David, that, you know, to make a call using artificial or pre-recorded voice. So that's why I was asking, under TCPA.
Yes, so we've worked with, and that's going to typically fall under the Attorney General's office. I believe that in Mr. Cox's case, because they have both, again, the civil and the criminal options, although we could elect to bring something under the TCPA. I'll let Mr. Cox talk about his own case, but I don't believe it was an actual phone call. But if things were to be distributed through robocalls, that is where we explore absolutely using the TCPA.
Okay, and that's the Telephone Consumer Protection Act?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
This was an internet posting of a recording.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't an actual phone call?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, that's the end of this panel. Thank you all very much. We're going to go to one person who's favorable with amendments virtually, Margaret Durkin. Not there. All right, we'll go then to those in unfavorable. Andrew Northrup, Mark Canellis, and then virtually Kathy Banuelos. All right, I see her on the screen. Whoever would like to go first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Andrew Northrup, and I am a senior attorney in the Forensics Division of the Maryland Office of the Public Defender. We respectfully request an unfavorable report on this bill because we feel that this bill is overbroad and criminalizes conduct that may be better addressed in the civil arena. While the ease with which deepfakes can be generated by virtually anyone with access to a computer is truly alarming, this bill is too broad and may have a chilling effect on free speech at a time when the risk of free speech being curtailed is greater than ever. One of our greatest concerns in this bill is that any violation of the new provisions pertaining to the use of artificial intelligence or the use of deepfakes is a felony, regardless of the degree of actual harm. It is not difficult to conjure up hypotheticals where a felony conviction is wholly disproportionate to the conduct charged. Sticking with the high school theme, imagine a student who creates and emails out a deepfake audio recording of a principal canceling class for the next day. According to this bill, he's convicted under the proposed statute of a felony. All the statute requires is an intent to mislead and some kind of economic damages, which wouldn't be hard to conjure up. And even more troubling is that anyone who forwards this hypothetical under this bill, whether they knew it to be a deepfake or not, could easily be caught up in a prosecution as well and undergo the stressful ordeal of a felony trial, where the outcome is far from certain. To be clear, the use of deepfakes and AI for traditional theft schemes appears to be covered under existing laws. And this bill seems to be targeted at reputation and emotional distress and concomitant economic damages. Traditionally, the harms of defamation and infliction of emotional distress are civil torts, and making an aggrieved person whole is best done through the monetary damage. And actually, we do like the fact the injunctive relief part of this bill, which seems appropriate. However, criminalizing this conduct, particularly when the threat of a felony conviction is excessive at best and dangerous at worst. And these times we should err on the side of not criminalizing free speech unless all other options have been exhausted. And we are nowhere close to this point at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Mark Caneas, and I am a public defender also in the Forensics Division of the Maryland Office of the Public Defender. I also have a background in AI, having earned a PhD in aerospace engineering, specializing in human AI systems. To be clear, protecting victims of fraud, defamation, theft, harassment, extortion, child pornography, grandparent schemes are legitimate government goals, but they are also supported by existing criminal and civil statutes. Therefore, we are respectfully requesting an unfavorable report on this bill because the criminal parts of this bill are vague and overbroad to the point that they will be used, or could be used, to criminalize and suppress free speech. During his address to Congress last week, the President endorsed the Take It Down Act, which attempted to similarly criminalize deep fakes. He declared his plans to abuse the act, saying, quote, "I'm going to use this bill for myself too." As Mr. Northrup explained, if a child who makes a stupid mistake could face 5 years in prison, imagine who else could be punished for their political views, for government positions. Some may say certainly the First Amendment protections of freedom of speech will protect against that. That might be true. That might not be true. Maybe not all government officials in Maryland feel that way. Regardless, the First Amendment protections are not self-enforcing. Claims that these issues will be addressed on a case-by-case basis or as applied or as subject to the scrutiny of our courts is insufficient to protect against free speech, violations of free speech. That only means that the statute ought to have been revised prior to testing it out on our population. You can raise, as that goes, you can raise First Amendment free speech arguments, but that is a trial argument. It is only after you've been detained and arrested and jailed, missing work, losing your job, losing your housing. The inevitable effect of this bill may suppress free speech. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Banuelos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. I'll keep my comments brief. I'd just like to thank and acknowledge Deputy State Prosecutor Sarah David, as well as Senator Hester and her staff. We also have First Amendment concerns. Certainly appreciate the challenge here in trying to address gaps in law with these novel technologies and bad actors out there. But we share some of the concerns already addressed about potentially chilling speech and the bill being overbroad. We've offered amendments that are outlined in our memo. My understanding is that those amendments are being incorporated into the bill. And with these changes, that we will be neutral on the bill. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, Delegate Phillips, we are going to go to questions here. Delegate Phillips, and I'll work my way around.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And to the last person that spoke, I would like to hear more with regard to the amendments that you've offered. But to the panelists on the here with us, Mr. Dashawn Darian was the gentleman who initiated the deep fake of the principal at Pikesville. What are the suggestions that you have to ensure that something like that does not happen legislatively?
Legislatively, well, first of all, this should be addressed. I mean, if you're looking to make the the principal whole, which is really the concern here, he's slander action. He's got all the civil suits against him, which he's currently undergoing. I think the injunctive part is very good because it forces the removal of that. But I'm not sure how adding a criminalization component to it really assists anything.
So if people are aware that if they perform these deep fakes, they use they address someone's identity in this particular way, you don't think that that would deter them from participating in this?
Well, they could also be sued for a lot of money. And I think that that is a deterrent that has traditionally worked through centuries to prevent defamation or intentional infliction of emotional distress.
And if I'm a person that doesn't have a lot of money, then what does it matter?
You still have to go through the process of being sued. And I guess, and I'll just be honest with you, I mean, one of these things, is there possibly a criminalization scheme that could work? But this particular one is too broad, and making every possible slight of this a felony is incredibly problematic.
And I don't disagree with you. I'm asking you what works. And at some point, this is a criminal act.
I honestly don't know what works. I mean, that's the thing. But I know that basically the knee-jerk reaction to go to a felony seems incredibly problematic.
All right, it would be nice if you came back and said what works.
Okay, very, very well.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. Does the prosecution of this bill potentially run afoul of the United States Supreme Court case law regarding the protection of parody, like satirical substance?
I mean, I don't think so. Like, the way that this bill is drafted is designed to be the intent to defraud. And so I think that I think it's designed to protect, First Amendment free expression. However, where that line is can be a little bit blurry. So it's easy to see somebody's charged for this where they might not have intended that, where they still wind up caught up in a criminal case where they're facing a felony.
Is it difficult to prove the intent? Say if someone gives a defense that it was just a parody, I was making fun of someone. Isn't that a defense of this, potentially?
I think it is a defense, but I mean, it's a question of whether the jury believes that or not, or what evidence there is.
But there is United States Supreme Court case law protecting parody, right?
Yes, there is.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all very much for testifying. This is, I guess, for the woman from the motion picture industry. Your language that you proposed in your testimony, I think, narrows this pretty closely. It sounds like the other side, Ms. David, was willing to accept this. A person may not knowingly, willfully, with fraudulent intent, use artificial intelligence or a deepfake representation to impersonate, falsely depict, or claim to represent another person with the intent to defraud or cause harm to that person. Is that, I mean, that's pretty narrow, and you guys are okay if we get that language in, is that right?
That's correct. So we've requested a deletion of the word mislead, which I think it just injects a certain ambiguity. It's not defined. And we think that the other two terms with the intent to defraud and cause harm are specific enough to address this specific fact pattern.
Okay. And, when we were, this is for the public defender, when we were dealing with Grace's Law years and years ago, the first time around, I will tell you that we had the exact same arguments from the public defender. Why shouldn't these people go the civil route? Why shouldn't we don't need to, this is overly broad. We don't want to criminalize people making a mistake and sending out an email that may have been bullying somebody else, and that person just happened to commit suicide because they were so upset that from the kind of conduct that was done. And the fact of the matter is that this is really not about criminalizing or putting these people in jail. It's about making them scared enough to say, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be doing this in the first place, and it's preventative by nature. And that's the idea behind a lot of these criminal statutes. Isn't that so?
I don't know what the idea behind a lot of these criminal statutes are, but I do think that anytime you put penalties in there, you can assume that they will be used. And frankly, in most situations, I think a felony for this type of behavior would be disproportionate.
Okay. And finally, just to the motion picture industry, you guys used to give us tours of your facility in DC, and we really missed that. So we hope maybe you guys can invite us down.
Absolutely. We were happy to host and show off our headquarters. We have some new props in that I'm sure everyone will enjoy seeing.
Mr. Chair, thank you, panel, for coming in to testify. In reference to the comment about the president, as we move into the quantum age, on the other hand, in reference to the president's comments in the past on fake news, couldn't that be a warning to the general public to not be so sensitive to propaganda that we might see that might be computer aided, like in War of the Worlds and things like that?
I think it is good for us to encourage a general healthy skepticism of the information we get through social media. But I don't think we should rely on every individual to be able to make that assertion in all cases.
Yes, but the individual should be open-minded to the possibility that it could be propaganda and fake news, right?
I'd assume that people should always evaluate it, yes.
Thank you very much.
Further questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you all very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1425. Thank you. We're going to go to Delegate Ampry and House Bill 1346. We're going to call Delegate Ampry, Lucius Outlaw, Adam Holofcener, Hannibal Kennerer, Dorian Rogers. Then there are 3 people who are virtual. Sorry, Hunter. Eric Nielsen, yes. Adewale Oduye, yes. Philip Wolotsky. All right, that's fine. Delegate Ampry, go ahead for 3 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Judiciary Committee. I come before you again in support of House Bill 1346, hoping the third time's a charm, the PACE Act. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of the bill. I know there's some new members here, so I will try and do a quick refresher on what the bill does and what the bill does not do, and leave the rest of more time for my panel to be able to discuss. House Bill 1346 establishes clear guidelines for when artistic expression can be admitted in court, ensuring that creative works are not misinterpreted as fact or weaponized against the artist. The bill protects free expression while maintaining fairness in legal processes and reinforcing that Maryland is both a state that values justice and creativity. So what the bill does is it creates a 4-pronged test to when and how creative expression can be used in the court of law. That 4-pronged test would include, you have to prove that the defendant intended the expression to be taken literally. Number 2, that there's strong indication that the creative expression referred to specific facts of the alleged offense. And number 3 is relevant to the disputed issue of fact. And number 4 is probative value cannot be obtained from other admissible evidence. So the goal here is to make sure that freedom of expression, that creative expression is properly protected here in the state of Maryland, and I truly believe it aligns with the nation's best practices. We see that California has already passed legislation like this. Louisiana has passed legislation to better protect creative expression. Georgia has recently moved it out of committee. New York has recently moved it out of committee as well, and Missouri is also moving it on it as well. So we're seeing some good activations for this bill to move, and I truly believe there's an opportunity for us to make sure that we're not just relying on common law principles, that we have clear guidelines for our prosecutors to be able to follow to make sure creative expression is not improperly used, because when it is improperly used, we are seeing that it disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities, it disproportionately impacts certain forms of art and not others. So we want to make sure that it's fair. Now, I want to be clear on what the bill does not do. The bill does not ban the use of lyrics in court. You can still use creative expression. It simply requires that they meet this threshold that we've laid out to make sure that wrongful convictions are not coming forward, which we are now seeing in the multiple other states, which you'll hear later on today from panelists, is that in some other states, they are now having to go back and correct situations where creative expression was improperly used in court. I don't want that happening in Maryland. I want to make sure we have clear guidelines. And it also ensures that prosecutors are going to have to rely on real evidence. Lyrics or creative expression should be something you bring if you cannot bring forward actual evidence in that matter. Maryland has been a long time a place where creativity thrives. In order for that to continue, we must make sure that we pass legislation like this to ensure that we protect creative expression. I asked for a favorable report on this bill, and I also just want to highlight that we also have support from the Maryland Black Caucus has written a letter in support of this bill. The Latino Caucus is also supporting this bill, and you'll see in your committee testimony, we have support from national organizations like the Recording Academy or the Grammys. You have support from the recording industry, et cetera, et cetera. You take the time to go through that, and you also got an email earlier today with some more points about the bill. With that said, again, I ask for a favorable report on the bill. Thank you very much. This one's going down this way.
Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. For the record, my name is Hannibal Kemmer, and I'm here on behalf of the Office of Public Defender, urging a favorable report on House Bill 1346. What Delegate Ampry's done with this legislation is to codify the rule that the Maryland Court of Appeals announced in Montague versus State, a 2020 decision finding, quote, that the closer the nexus between a defendant's rap lyrics and the details of an alleged crime, the lower the danger of admitting the lyrics as unfairly prejudicial, propensity propensity evidence of the defendant's bad character. Remember that the court in Montague was writing 9 years after it had reversed a conviction because prejudicial rap lyrics were admitted against an OPD client in Hanna v. State. In that case, the Court of Appeals held that Mr. Hanna, quote, was unfairly prejudiced by the above quoted cross-examination. Mr. Hanna's direct examination did not open the door to the state's use of his writings. His writings were not offered as evidence of his knowledge or intent. Indeed, Mr. Hanna's writings were probative of no issue other than the issue of whether he has a propensity for violence. We see implementation of this rule in the provisions of House Bill 1346, proposed section 10-926B. I'm not going to go over all of the specifics of that provision, but that's the meat of the law. And while this is largely a restatement of and a clarification of the Maryland common law, we think that there's real value in codifying the rule in a statute that trial judges can reference from the bench during arguments or trials, as opposed to having to reference a lengthy opinion that doesn't lend itself to easy, quick interpretation. For these reasons, we urge a favorable report on House Bill 1346, and I invite any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and distinguished members. My name is Lucius Outlaw, and I'm a professor at Howard University School of Law, where I teach criminal law-related courses. Today, I speak on behalf of myself as a criminal law educator, criminal defense attorney, and former public defender. Today, I speak in support of HB 1346, the PACE Act. I'm using my time to address two common objections to the bill. One, the law is not needed due to existing case law precedents. And two, the law will deprive prosecutors of valuable evidence to prosecute dangerous and harmful criminals. First, the bill is not needed due to existing case law. This is simply not true. While there are good precedents where Maryland courts have barred prosecutors from using defendants' rap lyrics as trial evidence, however, these precedents are not sufficient substitutes for HB 1346 for two key reasons. One, case law does not establish clear lines in the same way as court rules established by statute. And two, case law precedents are consistently exposed to being overturned or diminished by subsequent trial and appellate judges who disagree with the precedent. Second objection, the law will deprive prosecutors of valuable evidence to prosecute dangerous and harmful criminals. This is also not true. The PACE Act is not a complete bar to prosecutors using rap lyrics or other artistic expression as evidence. Instead, the PACE Act imposes a test for prosecutors to satisfy if they want to use a defendant's rap lyrics or artistic expression as criminal evidence. It is a test that is consistent with Maryland case laws such as Hanna v. State and Young v. State. HB 1346 embodies the thrust of these precedents, that to be relevant and admissible, a defendant's rap lyrics or artistic expression must have a direct connection to the facts of the case. That is, the lyrics must be statements of historical fact reflecting the conduct or circumstances of the case. Rap hip-hop has evolved from being an underground music genre dismissed as a fad to a cultural phenomenon of great influence. Yet despite this influence, rap and hip-hop has still not achieved the respect on par of other art forms in our criminal courts. It's time to change that, and this bill is an important and needed step in the right direction. Thank you.
Chair Clippinger, Madam Vice Chair, and honorable members of the Judiciary Committee, my name is Adam Hollofcenter. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland's Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, a nonprofit legal services organization that provides access to pro bono attorney services and education to Maryland creatives. I testify here today in support of HB 1346, the PACE Act. I've had the fortune of practicing law and advocating on behalf of artist clients for over the past decade. As such, I understand what it means to balance the interest of Maryland artists and their art with the objectives of the criminal justice system. In this particular instance, the PACE Act is required in order to more fairly rebalance the interests at play in this context. Shortly after I moved back to my hometown of Baltimore City in 2014 and began work at MDVLA, I became aware of a story involving up-and-coming local rapper Young Moose, aka Kevron Evans. Law enforcement officers used the content of Moose's songs and music videos as evidence to seek a warrant against Moose. In so doing, Moose ended up entangled in the criminal justice system, missing out on his opportunity to take advantage of the viral success he had recently obtained. As is unsurprising, the experience of Moose and his community members, those victims of white supremacy, redlining, mass incarceration, police brutality, and so much more, reasonably led Moose to feature standard tropes of the streets in his songs and music videos: drugs, guns, and pain. But a troubadour like Moose does more than just play acting reality. He also tells the news. In his songs, Moose name-checked Detective Daniel Herschel, one of the officers who used Moose's art against him in criminal proceedings, as a crooked cop, and he was right. Daniel Herschel was a member of the notorious Gun Trace Task Force. There's a deep and tragic irony here that the only parts of Moose's music that should have been taken literally, those describing the illegal actions of Daniel Herschel, were notably the only parts of Moose's work that weren't considered at all. This case gives us an opportunity to truly understand the scope of the PACE Act. Evidence wasn't provided to show that Moose intended for the generalized tropes in his artwork to be taken literally. Therefore, under the PACE Act, those aspects of Moose's work should be inadmissible. However, if a work includes such specificity as to take you from a generalized tableau to a real encounter, one with names, dates, and locations, then it would be admissible under the PACE Act. Therefore, we respectfully request the committee vote favorably. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers, good to see you.
Great to see you as well. Chair, Vice Chair, honorable delegates, and fellow Marylanders. My name is Dorian Rogers, pronouns he, him, his, and I serve as the state president of the NAACP Maryland State Conference Youth and College Division, representing over 16 youth and college units across our great state of Maryland. Quite frankly, when we talk about this bill, we're talking about not only reaffirming the importance of expression, but how that pertains to our legal justice system. Listen, when we talk about making sure that we're uplifting the importance of not just rule of law, but again, consistency within our courts, we need to recognize how history plays a role in this, especially ensuring that all Marylanders have access to a fair trial, but most importantly, ensuring that these items, especially in terms of lyrics, are not being used against them and there's an actual threshold. This bill does exactly that. And so not only is it my honor to represent our state youth and college division in supporting this bill, but making sure that we as Marylanders are setting the precedent and the stance across our country. Quite frankly, we're not trying to be trendy in the state. We're trendsetters. I've said this before this committee and before many others, but we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing to make sure that this legislation hits home? And as we celebrate in youth and college our 89th anniversary, founded by the most honorable Juanita Jackson Mitchell from Baltimore City, we're talking about how that fire and how that energy translates into action, especially when we talk about legislation. And so we, as not only members of this association, but as Marylanders, ask before you all as our elected representatives, what are we doing to pass this bill and to ensure that everyone has access to this threshold in our courts? Continue to set the example, and that's exactly what we want in the NAACP. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move now to Eric Nielsen.
Thank you. I'm here to express my strong support for House Bill 1346 and would like to thank the sponsors of the bill, particularly Delegate Ampry, for supporting this important legislation. And this reform is urgently needed. In courtrooms in Maryland and across the country, prosecutors are increasingly introducing creative expression, especially rap music, as evidence in criminal proceedings. Rather than acknowledge rap as a form of artistic expression, police and prosecutors argue that the lyrics should be interpreted literally, in the words of one prosecutor, as autobiographical journals, even though the genre is rooted in a long tradition of storytelling that privileges figurative language, is steeped in hyperbole, and employs all of the same poetic devices we find in more traditional works of poetry. This tactic effectively denies rap music the status of art, and in the process gives prosecutors a dangerous advantage in the courtroom. By presenting rap lyrics as rhymed confessions of illegal behavior, they are often able to obtain convictions even when other evidence may be lacking. Today, no other fictional form, musical or otherwise, is misused like this in the courts. In 2025, we might expect that rap would be recognized as the art form that it is, not to mention the multi-billion-dollar industry it has become, one that offers opportunities for upward mobility to people from communities where such opportunities are all too rare. And yet, despite the fact that many people are using rap lyrics and rap music to uplift themselves and their communities, it's being exploited in the criminal justice system. Our research has identified close to 700 cases where rap music has been used as evidence, but we know the number is far higher and growing, with no sign of slowing without the kind of legal intervention proposed here. My time is limited, so I won't go into the studies themselves, but a growing body of research continues to demonstrate that rap music can be highly prejudicial, including in the context of a jury trial. While it is true that courts across the country, including in some very conservative jurisdictions, have begun to recognize this, new judicial precedent is not enough to stop a practice that has continued and grown over several decades. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're going to move to Adewale Aduye.
Yes. My name is Adewale Oduye, and I'm speaking here in favor of House Bill 1346, also known as the PACE Act. As a former prosecutor in Los Angeles with 12 years of experience in the largest local prosecutorial agency in the nation, which is the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. I fully support the PACE Act's protection of creative expression. In my time as a prosecutor, I saw how systematic biases and racial disparities often shaped criminal cases. And I believe that creative expression should not be weaponized without proper context. The PACE Act ensures that creative works aren't taken out of context or used unfairly to portray someone in a negative light. Instead, it focuses the justice system on the facts, not misguided interpretations of self-expression. This aligns with my ongoing advocacy for a fairer, more equitable system where justice isn't clouded by bias, and protecting creative expression is vital for true justice, especially for marginalized communities disproportionately affected by these biases. Creative expression should empower, not criminalize, and we must protect that in our legal system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Wolotsky.
Thank you so much. Vice Chair Bartlett, members of the Judiciary Committee, my name's Phil Wolotsky. I'm the executive director of an organization called Free Our Art. It's a new C4 organization actually launching this upcoming Thursday, centered around protecting First Amendment creative freedoms. Our coalition includes a broad spectrum across the arts, not only the Recording Academy, the RIAA, but also SAG-AFTRA, the largest actors union in the United States, PEN America, the largest advocacy organization for writers and authors, as well as Americans for the Arts, which is a largest generalist arts advocacy organization, among many others. Many have discussed here today why this is a genuine growing crisis. I would flag that there have been, in the past 12 months, 3 cases in Tennessee, Texas, and Georgia that have resulted in overturned convictions because of inappropriate admittance of evidence or use by prosecutors. Moreover, there is a surging movement, as Delegate Ampry mentioned, across the United States, both in red and blue states, to protect this. I would note that actually the House Georgia committee that approved this did so unanimously, this bill. In New York State, it actually passed the Senate last week. It is in their assembly. It went through their assembly House committee. It's now on their assembly floor. And in the state of Missouri, as mentioned, this is a bipartisan bill in both the House and Senate. And we have hearings coming up in 2 weeks. For states that want to grow their creative economies, this is a smart thing to do to send a single signal. After 3 years, this committee understands this bill. It is a reasonable bipartisan piece of legislation. 10 of the 24 members of this committee are sponsors, including both Democratic and Republican members. We would respectfully ask the opportunity for an up or down vote this year. We're very hopeful for that, and I'm hopeful at this time of incredible division in America, this shows we can still come around around core American values like the First Amendment and fair trials. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Delegate, I'm going to start with Delegate Phillips and then come on around. Thanks.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, thank you. There are some proposed amendments from the panelists, and I'd ask the sponsor if he concurs with those amendments and just make it clear what those amendments are.
Yeah, so I concur with those amendments. What the amendments would do is more so lay out, I know there's been concern in the past, and the chair and I spoke about this last year, around like what really constitutes art, right? I think there's a blurry line sometimes of what is a journal of what I did today and what's a journal of future rap lyrics, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what the amendment does is it lays out based on, and I'll let my panelists answer as well, but it lays out the, make sure that the creative expression, the definition of creative expression aligns with the federal rules around copyright. So like we are now saying, hey, if it's creative expression, what would be protected under copyright law is the same things that we want to protect here. So it kind of just makes it more clear, because I know there was concern from the chair and concern from the judges about that piece last year. So I don't know if you want to speak to it. You can probably speak to it a little better than I can.
Please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Delegate, for that question. Because there is generally not a lot of interplay between works like the copyright law and criminal law, it was our perspective that creating parity between an area of the law like copyright, which the explicit domain is essentially just creative expressions, that should, as Delegate Ampry mentioned, make clear that there's not, copyright law has made very clear what creative expression is for several decades. And therefore, by creating parity between copyright law and this law, there shouldn't be any questions about that either.
Okay, and so I want to be clear because I'm reading the judiciary's note. And it says the judiciary would note that the bill appears to cover all expression that is not literal, which could include common use of analogies and metaphors and preclude all manner of statement from admission, more than songs, poems, and artistic expression. So they're very concerned that that would then require them to have additional hearings on the acceptance or non-acceptance of the expression.
Yeah, and I think that we already have evidentiary hearings to make sure that something is admissible in the courtroom, right? So I think that I don't really agree with the judiciary on that, and I also have my opinions on trying to work through the opinions of the judiciary within the legislature, and I could have a poli-sci conversation about separations of powers another day. But ultimately, I truly believe that with this proposed amendment, I think we fall right in line with what they're asking for here. And I think with that amendment, it kind of addresses their issue.
And I think it's also a matter of scope, right? I mean, to me, they don't actually speak to the same thing, because by clarifying what constitutes a creative expression, that creative expression that is potentially admissible is still bound by the rest of the scope of the bill as presented, right? So mere analogy, the likelihood that there's a metaphor that is going to pass the threshold laid out in the PACE Act, just in the same way, if you only have a couple of letters or a couple of words in copyright, it's likely to not be registrable as a copyrightable work because it won't pass that originality threshold. So there is parity here that is also going to say, if it's not enough to make sense as a copyrightable entity, then it's also likely it won't have enough specificity to pass that bar under the PACE Act.
Well, thank you for that answer, and we deal with the judiciary on those issues every day. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Delegate Tolles.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. So Delegate Phillips did ask a few of my questions. Well, he did ask my main question, but would you say that based off the explanation, Delegate, that just occurred, that explains how your bill is different from last year when you brought the bill? Is that? Because that was sort of my question.
Yeah, it's different. And then I think also, I didn't get a chance to explain, but, we really want to get this bill across the finish line. And in some other states, the bill is very close to the same thing here, but there have been some compromises and little small tweaks that we're open to taking into consideration. And I think this committee has heard this bill a third time now. So I think, we're open to having conversations and getting this bill to a vote, as the last panelist mentioned. I think that there's an appetite to get this across the finish line, and I think it's just a matter of, the will of the committee willing to offer some thoughtful changes that don't disrupt the intent and purpose of the bill. But I think this amendment here is one of the examples of where we're willing to make some proper movements towards getting this across the finish line to protect creative expression here in Maryland.
Okay, great. Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up. She's distracted, so I can go ahead and ask. Folks will say that this is an attempt to help, folks that are, what others would consider not, good stewards of the community. They are not, I'm going to say, look at it as if it's trying to get rappers or whomever, out of being able to use their lyrics as evidence.
Yeah.
You all saw the Super Bowl. I did not watch Super Bowl. I was kind of boycotting it. But I did watch some highlights of a particular artist that was the main, highlight for the Super Bowl. And they generally have been known to do some more lyrics that are uplifting to the community. So could you talk about how, this bill will encourage the continuation of those type of lyrics and not be used against the Black community, but also could you expand on how this just does not help the Black community, help country music and other genres of music?
Yeah, I mean, this bill's about, it's not the PAR Act, right? It's not just for, protecting the admissibility of rap, it's protecting the admissibility of creative expression, expansive. And I would kneel to Professor Nielsen, who can give more of the data points around how the use of expression has harmed particularly the Black and brown communities, like we've seen so many other forms of laws and things like that. But Professor Nielsen has way more data to describe kind of like the impacts and what's been happening and the fallout, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll defer to him if it's okay, Madam Vice Chair. If you want to take that, Professor Nielsen.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, I would say a few things. I agree with you that, while we do know that the vast majority of cases where creative expression is introduced as evidence, the vast majority target rap artists and rap as expression. But you are correct that this is about protecting more than that. This is about protecting creativity. This is about protecting our First Amendment rights. What we have seen is that the overwhelming majority of cases where creative expression is introduced, it is rap artists. It's maybe a handful of cases that we've found that attack other art forms. And what we're seeing is that a lot of artists are now starting to, their own speech is being chilled. They are being very careful about what they are rapping about, because they know that they're being watched, and they know that they could be subject to these types of prosecutions. Now, we might agree that rap music could be more positive, could be more uplifting, but that is not a burden that any artist should have to bear. We should not stifle creative expression for fear of prosecution. We don't ask that of any other art form or any other artists. And so this is really just applying the same standards that we apply to everybody else, and unfortunately we don't extend to rap artists for reasons that I think are fairly obvious.
Okay. Thank you for that question. And you do, get into, standards and so forth. And I know we have the rule of evidence, but in the essence of time, I will defer to my other colleague. So we can, wait for that. Maybe perhaps somebody will talk about that. But I do want to say in closing that I had the wonderful opportunity to volunteer for the Maryland Arts when I was in law school. And so I really always loved what you all do in terms of, protecting artists as one of the, initiatives that you all do under that Maryland Arts. But I hope you expressed some of that out in Prince George's. When I was there, I didn't see any out of Prince George's, but obviously went to law school in Baltimore. I didn't see any of that work being done in Prince George's. So I definitely would like to see you all make that expansion to Prince George's to, do some volunteer legal work.
We'll be sure to make sure that we actually get you the upcoming list that we have coming up in Prince George's. So don't worry.
Okay. Thank you. Sounds good. Delegate Williams.
Yes, I'm going to be really quick because I know we have to vote once we're done here before floor. Just really quickly, back to the professor with regards to the evidentiary. You were talking about how this bill is needed because the case law as it relates to the rules of evidence sometimes can get modified and go skew both ways. And so this is actually kind of codifying in terms of the evidentiary standard towards these types of lyrics. I just was wondering if you could explain the significance of that.
And she's talking to Mr. Outlaw, Mr. Nelson.
Yes, I'm sorry, Professor Outlaw.
Thank you for that question. So what I was trying to explain is that there's a thing called, common law, where common law past cases precedents is used as the rule of law going forward in other cases. And yes, there's been cases where in Maryland where courts have said rap lyrics or artistic expression cannot be used unless there's a factual nexus between the artistic expression and the alleged conduct, alleged facts of the case. But the problem is that case law is always prone to being minimized or overturned. A judge tomorrow can say, I disagree with that and rule the other way. And now the common law has shifted another way based on one judge or one appellate court panel. That's why a rule codified by statute is so critical, because it's much harder to change a rule codified by statute than it is common law.
Understood. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Delegate Conaway.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill. I think I'm a co-sponsor. Thank you, panel. So my question is involving the art form and creative expression part. On one hand, you want everyone to believe that you're a real gangster rapper, AKA you did it, you do this, you does that, that's what you do. Then when you get checked on it or asked about it legally, then you say, oh, well, it was freedom of expression. How do you balance the two out?
No, I mean, that's the nature of a lot of music forms, right? I think hip hop is just one of them where it's braggadocious. It's, I mean, think about it this way. There's a lot of rappers who might talk about how much money they have and how they're swimming in money, and then the videos, they got big stacks of money. Then they get in trouble and they pull up with a public defender. And you're like, hold up now, what happened to all that money, right? So the reality is it's an art form that plays a lot with that, and it's not just hip hop, right? Rock has that type of lavish lifestyle they present.
But here you were talking about criminal activity, and since you were talking about the money, and then you pull up with a public defender, well, people think you had that money and they come and jack you. What about that?
Oh, I'm not sure I follow.
Oh, you follow.
I'm not sure I follow, but at the end of the day, I think it's important to ensure people understand that the bill does not say creative expression can't be used. It's just saying there's a test to when it can be. I think it's important to always reiterate what the bill does and what it doesn't do. This isn't a blanketed protection that you can rap or sing about anything and you no longer can be used against you in court. If it's going to be used in court, we want to make sure that there's a nexus between that the lyrics you're presenting, the song you're presenting, the emotions you're presenting are actually tied to the actual case and are tied to the nexus of the case. That's necessarily not happening, and I think Professor Nielsen laid it out earlier. Yes, there's 700 case laws that we know of, but you know how I really wonder how often are young men or young women sat down in a room and told, hey, I pulled this video off YouTube of your rap song, we're gonna use it in court, why don't you go ahead and confess now? Like, how often does that probably happen, where if we pass this bill, we can send a signal to those young people, your creative expression is protected. Don't get in that room and make a confession or be forced into something, because you now know that, hey, this law passed in Maryland. Most 14-year-olds who are, on the streets or who make music for fun don't know the rules of evidence, don't know case law, but we pass a law like this, we send a signal to the creative expressions, people who have creative expression rights across the state of Maryland to know that they're protected. And I just, urge favorable report. But I know time is limited, so I'm sorry for that long-winded answer.
Thank you. And I appreciate your creative expression just now. That concludes the testimony for House Bill 1346. Thank you. We're going to move on to Delegate Warman for House Bill 1248.
And notice there was no opposition.
And I see Molly Montague? Yes, okay. Do we have Peggy Carnes? We probably don't, do we still have Joyce King? Okay, Peggy Carnes? Okay, alrighty. So we'll hear from, and of course we have Lisa Jordan. We'll hear from Delegate Warman for 3 minutes, and everyone else will have 2, and whenever you're ready, Delegate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for sticking with us. I know it's been a long day and you guys have to do voting before floor, so thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of HB 1248. This bill builds on Maryland's commitment to protecting individuals from digital exploitation and privacy violations, specifically addressing the serious issue of revenge pornography and unauthorized intimate visual depictions. It ensures that victims have a clear path to justice and that online platforms take responsibility in mitigating harm. This issue has been championed by numerous advocates and legal experts and digital rights organizations. You guys have the testimony in front of you. I won't bore you with who has written. I trust you guys will read it. But all of those groups and all of that advocacy underscores the urgent need to take action against these devastating consequences of non-consensual intimate image distribution. This is not the internet that I grew up in, and this is not the internet that you all have learned to navigate. This is a growing number of teenagers know somebody who has been a target of deep fake pornographic images or videos generated by artificial intelligence. 1 in 8 people, they aged 13 to 20, say they personally know somebody that has been a target of deep fake nude imagery, and 1 in 17 young people have been targets themselves. 71% of respondents who created deep fake imagery of others say they found the technology to do so on social media. So our kids are learning this on the social media that is largely unregulated. 53% reported that they found tools through an online search engine, so it's very easy to find these tools. While Maryland has already taken steps to address revenge pornography, new threats such as the deep fake technology and inconsistent content moderation by platforms demand further action. This committee has heard multiple bills on this topic, and each has a different approach to tackling this problem. I am in full support of whatever measure moves us forward in this space. This bill specifically takes a proactive approach by requiring platform accountability. Digital platforms with over 100,000 monthly US users must establish a process for individuals to request the removal of the non-consensual intimate visual depictions. And we're also mandating timely action. Platforms must act within 48 hours to remove reported content and maintain records for potential legal proceedings. We're also expanding the legal definitions. This bill includes computer-generated intimate depictions such as deepfake images so that modern technological threats are covered under the law. We're also strengthening penalties. Individuals convicted of distributing intimate images without consent would face up to 2 years in prison and a fine up to $5,000 or both. Current enforcement on these platforms remains inconsistent, and victims often struggle to get timely recourse. This bill ensures a structured, evidence-based approach to protecting individuals from digital exploitation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Whoever's ready to go next. Okay, Molly.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Molly Montague. I'm the Director of State Legislative Affairs for the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, better known as RAIN. We're the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization, and we run the National Sexual Assault Hotline. I imagine that some of you, like me, indulge in the scrolling of social media at the end of a long day or at the end of a long committee hearing. And maybe it's to turn your brains off a bit or watch reels of otters or see your friends' travel photos. That's what social media is meant to be. But imagine that you're scrolling and you come across a photo or even a video of you, one that you never put out there, showing parts of you that you never would. Perhaps one showing you doing things that you never did. What if it wasn't you in that picture, but your child? No one should have sexually explicit images of themselves released online and distributed without their consent. Whether real or generated by artificial intelligence, these non-consensual intimate images harm victims indiscriminately, and that harm repeats every time the material is shared. While headlines about the victimization of popular celebrities like Taylor Swift grab attention, there are also countless stories of everyday folks, like teachers and teenagers, who find their lives destroyed by the spread of non-consensual intimate images. We know of teens' death by suicide and women stalked at their place of work because of non-consensual intimate images that were shared and leveraged against them, with no means to take them down. HB 1248 protects victims of digital exploitation. This bill will hold internet platforms accountable by requiring them to remove such imagery when reported, and this bill will provide justice for victims by allowing prosecutors to go after those who publish digitally created, non-consensual, explicit images. Victims have seen time and again that social media sites are unwilling to prioritize the takedown of such images. This appropriately targeted legislation focuses on specific harms. I hope you will vote for favorable passage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Lisa Jordan with the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We're also here in support of House Bill 1248. Delegate Warman, it is lovely to be at the table with you for the first time this session. This is one of 4 bills that the committee has before it to consider regarding deep fakes, 3 originating here in the House and 1 is crossing over from the Senate. And I think that the theme amongst them all is really that the harm that you receive because you have an image of yourself is the same if it's a deep fake or if it's an actual picture. And so MCASA's position is that we urge the committee to really address this issue using one of the 4 legislative vehicles that you have. This one is unique in that it does add takedown provisions, which I think are important. It's also currently being considered by Congress, as you may have heard the president mention in his remarks the other night. I will say that MCASA is concerned that the wealth of bills that you have before you could lead to kind of a confusion confusion about which road to take. And so we ask you to really choose something that will improve our criminal law. So our criminal law is not just for actual images, but also includes deep fakes and altered images. The bill coming over from the Senate also includes per se defamation, which is certainly an important issue. And then just earlier today, you heard House Bill 1425, Chair Wilson's bill, which is an excellent bill that we also support. It's a more general bill. However, if you enacted House Bill 1425, I do believe you would need to look carefully about whether you're creating any rule of lenity issues if you also enact something that's specific to sexual violence, and so would want to address it there. So many drafting issues that I urge you not to let get in the way of actually enacting help for survivors this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Carnes?
Thank you. I'm Peggy Cairns, and I'm with the Maryland Coalition Against Pornography as our newsletter editor and education chairperson. We thank the committee for considering this bill. Has so much potential to provide relief for victims of maliciously distributed or revenge pornography. You have in my written testimony a screen capture of some of the various apps that are used for this purpose. It's so easy to find them. And this terrifying phenomenon is happening to teenagers and adults alike. It could happen to anyone. The passage of this bill could have numerous beneficial effects, such as guiding online markets to adapt and evolve to make profit in less exploitative ways, enabling freedom for girls and women to not feel threatened or blackmailed with the distribution of their images, more freedom for women's and girls' likenesses to not be used without their knowledge, more freedom for survivors to not be reminded of and haunted by their traumas, less cyber abuse, bullying, and shame. I have a personal stake in this. I have a friend who has had this happen to them. Perhaps you do too. Let's hope not more spouses and sisters and mothers and friends have this happen to them. Advancing this bill will take an important step toward ensuring the accountability of online platforms, fostering responsible online behavior, justice, and healing. And I agree with Ms. Jordan. This bill is unique in that it gives that takedown provision. So we urge a favorable report on HB 1248. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, that concludes the testimony for House Bill 1248.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to move to Delegate Alston. I saw her a minute ago. Maybe she'll come back. It looks. Yeah, Delegate Alston.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know if you had called or not.
Yep, it's okay.
Would it be okay? I know we didn't do the paperwork for the sponsor panel. I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay.
Okay, can I start calling? So you tell me who is coming up and I'll just check them off.
Okay.
Okay.
The favorables.
So the favorables, okay. Carrie Forrestal, Scott Graham, Perry Paylor, Lisa Tenney. See how many.
Caroline and Angelica, if there's.
Okay, so it looks like that's all we're gonna have room for, and then I'll call the next group.
All right.
All right, and Delegate, you have 3 minutes. Everyone else has 2, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Judiciary Committee, the longest working folks here in Annapolis. So I really appreciate all of your service to the state of Maryland. You know, this bill is very important to me. It has, this is my second year here before you with it, and many of you who know me know that I am very liberal when it comes to criminal justice issues and criminal justice reforms. So for me to introduce a bill that has an enhanced penalty should speak volumes. And the reason that I've introduced this bill is because we have a serious problem in our society. We have lost some level of decency and decorum when we were all growing up, we knew that there were certain things you didn't do. There were certain places that you did not want to violate the sanctity of those locations, places like religious institutions. As a little kid, I knew if I was going to church or mosque, I had to behave. There was like no mistake about it. I had to behave myself. And I think many of us grew up with that, regardless of what your faith background is. You knew when you went to a hospital, my grandmother always told us every day, make sure you have on, everything is clean in case you have to go to the hospital, because we had to be at our best if we went to the hospital. And it's because as a society, we had a great deal of respect for those places. And we considered those places sacred. And the reason we considered them sacred is because when we go there, we're either going to worship or to seek help. And so when someone violates the sanctity of those places, I believe they need to be punished. And I believe they need to be punished more harshly than whatever the regular punishment is we have for them. And that's why I've introduced this bill called the Sacred Places Act. And it really came to light for me when a little girl on Mother's Day was shot in Washington, D.C. in the crossfire of a shooting that she had nothing to do with. And as her family was trying to bury her and do the final rites, a funeral director from another funeral home came and violated the sanctity of that funeral and shot one of the pallbearers and killed him. And that wasn't the first time that we've had violence at a funeral. But that time struck different because this poor little girl and her family couldn't even respectfully lay her to rest. And these crimes are happening all around us. They're happening at funeral homes. They're happening in our hospitals. Our nurses are putting their lives on the line, and they did so much for us during COVID. The least we can do is have their back by telling people that when you commit crimes against our nurses and when you violate the sanctity of a hospital, you're going to be punished more harshly. So I ask for your favorable report with House Bill 1308.
Perfect timing. Whoever would like to go next.
I'll go next.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Bartlett and esteemed members of the House Judiciary Committee. For the record, I am Perry Paler, Deputy State's Attorney for Prince George's County. I'm before you today on behalf of the State's Attorney, Aisha Braveboy, and myself to express strong support for House Bill 1308, the Sacred Places Safety Act. Our office is committed to vigorously prosecuting violent offenders in Prince George's County. While working closely with law enforcement throughout our county and across Maryland, we've identified a critical gap in our ability to protect these essential community spaces. Just last month, our office secured a conviction in a case that highlights why this legislation is necessary. A jury found Wilson Chavis guilty of second-degree murder and related charges for the unconscionable act of shooting and killing Ronald Banks during a child's funeral service at a Prince George's County cemetery. This type of violence, committed in a space meant for mourning and reflection, demands enhanced accountability under our law. From my experience prosecuting violent offenders, I can tell you that our current statutory framework lacks the specific tools needed to address crimes committed in these protected spaces. This legislation creates a separate felony offense carrying up to 10 years imprisonment that can be imposed in addition to sentences for underlying violent crimes. The bill's clear definitions of medical facilities and places of worship provide our prosecutors with the precise language needed for effective enforcement. Furthermore, the enhanced penalties under HB 1308 serve both as a deterrent and as a means of securing justice for our communities. When individuals commit violent acts in hospitals or places of worship, they're just not committing a crime, they're violating spaces where our residents are often there at their most vulnerable stage. This legislation will provide prosecutors with the tools necessary to hold accountable those who will commit acts of violence in our sacred spaces. For the foregoing reasons, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 1308. Thank you.
Thank you. Whoever would want to go. Want to start this end and just work our way down?
Sure.
Okay.
Bear with me. I got off a 10-hour shift in the trauma center at 6 a.m. and came up here to be with you nice people. So.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. Can you just move the microphone a little bit closer?
Can.
There we go.
All right. My name is Dr. Kerry Forrestal. I'm here as the president-elect of the American College of Emergency Physicians. Between EMS and my former career and my current station as an attending, I have 46 years of experience. I represent over 600 emergency medicine physicians and the PAs and NPs that we represent or supervise in the thousands. Healthcare providers are an ongoing target of violence. Just look at the news and you can see what I'm talking about. There were reported 43,000 assaults against law enforcement officers in the latest year we have data for. Healthcare, 57,600. It's about 33% more. 4 out of 5 nurses have experienced at least one type of workplace violence in the last year, with the majority reporting an increase in such incidents. Powerful examples are all available. There are a lot of them, but time is limited, so I'll tell you this one. Ronnie George, a charge nurse friend of mine, was 7 months pregnant when a patient who was angry at her for being Indian flipped over on his knees, reached over the railing with his leg, and kicked her squarely in the stomach, sending her backwards. She did not miscarry, fortunately. Now, there's a concern that this law might be used indiscriminately, but there's against the psychotic or against the demented, and that's not the intention here. We get threatened all the time. It's illegal to make a threat against somebody's life. All right, we get threatened all the time, and we do not use that law in that way. Now, Maryland Criminal Code, Section 3203 includes 3 groups of protected people: police, probation officers, firefighters, EMTs, and rescue squad members. There is precedent for protecting people in healthcare with these sorts of laws. Time is getting short, so I will let you know these 2 things. 29 other states have made it a felony to assault a healthcare worker. All right, and this additionally will impact another problem that we're having with ER wait times. If a nurse gets assaulted, the nurse is going to leave the ER. It happens all the time. Less staffing, longer waits. Simple as that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Doc. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson and Vice Chair Bartlett and members of the committee, and thank you very much. My name is Scott Graham, and I'm the Director of Emergency Preparedness Workplace Safety for Holy Cross Health in the Maryland region, and I'm here today to advocate for the over 100,000 healthcare workers in the state of Maryland. I've been involved in public safety and healthcare now for 40 years, 26 of that as a paramedic, and another 10 as a volunteer firefighter. And as the doctor mentioned, I have protections under the law for anyone who assaults me as a public safety professional. In healthcare now, I've been involved for the last 11 years to decrease workplace violence incidents in healthcare, and I've been out here several times to advocate on behalf of the brave nurses, EVS workers, food nutrition workers, doctors, and technicians. Prior to coming into healthcare, I served in the fire service, and I realized that we would bring patients to the emergency department that in otherwise on the streets had committed heinous and violent crimes. Once they're in the emergency department, our healthcare workers are left vulnerable with those patients in the ED. This bill will add another deterrent to those who intentionally want to cause harm to our healthcare workers. You know, it's ironic I sit here today on the 5th anniversary of the World Health Organization's declaration of COVID as a worldwide pandemic and health emergency. Those same nurses and healthcare providers that you lauded as heroes and celebrated 5 years ago, I sit now and represent them as victims. And we ask each and every one of you to favorably support Bill 1308. In my organization last year, there were over 1,600 lost work days as a result of workplace violence. And as mentioned, these healthcare workers are no longer in a healthcare setting for a period of time to provide care. You know, if only are the 2 worst words in the English language. If only you would have passed this bill this year, that healthcare worker who could have been seriously injured or even killed would not have happened. The physical effects of workplace violence I witnessed personally with each and every colleague, but the emotional effects are much more devastating to each and every of these workers, which is why I advocate strongly again for the favorable passage of Bill 1308. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Hi again, Vice Chair Bartlett and committee members. My name is Lisa Tenney, and I am testifying on behalf of the Maryland Emergency Nurses Association in favor of HB 1308. I'll address increasing violence that is willingly and knowingly occurring in Maryland's medical facilities. It's fair to say that the Maryland healthcare providers were heartbroken to learn about the 4 recent violent events in York, Pennsylvania, West Palm Beach, and in Pittsburgh, PA, and just on Sunday in Buffalo, New York. The senseless loss of life, the physical and emotional trauma will forever negatively impact the patients that witnessed that, the healthcare workers, and of course their communities. It's also fair to say that no healthcare worker in Maryland was surprised by any of those events, because they've become so commonplace that when we hear about them, we say, well, here it goes again. Studies show that ER nurses experience a violent event every 2 months, and that according to OSHA, out of all the occupations in the United States, healthcare workers account for 73% of the missed work days from violence-related injuries. That's a sobering data point. For those of us who work in Maryland's ERs, we're exhausted from having to take care of patients with the longest wait times in the nation now for 8 years. When violence occurs, like Dr. Forrestal said, it worsens the wait times for patients and it increases the chance for patient harm. If we pass 1308, it can help us establish a shared mindset that medical facilities are sacred healing places, that we seriously support the patient's right to be safe when they're in a medical facility, and should someone violate that right, that they'll receive a stricter consequence, and that Maryland has a zero tolerance for violence against us. Thank you very much.
Questions? Delegate Simmons.
Thank you, and I really appreciate this bill. As a former employee of Luminous Health, working in security, I've had my fair of incidents with patients and patient family members. Let me ask you this, dealing with HIPAA. Often as a security officer in hospitals, that once a patient checks in to the system, it becomes kind of responsibility of the doctor. Seeing them multiple times that we've been called to incidents dealing with a patient, that we cannot engage a patient unless a doctor is present. Can you talk to me about the safeguards around our medical facilities when the doctor isn't present, or how this will enhance that ability?
And that one's to me?
Yes, sir.
So we have a number of protocols. Every system is a little bit different. We have a number of protocols that will kick in when the doctor can't come immediately.
Move the mic closer.
Sorry. So we have a number of protocols that we'll use that are set so that in case the doctor is not available, they'll kick in automatically. The nurses will be able to execute them, and even the security guards. So we try to, in a place like a trauma center, you're pulled in very many directions. You can't always be. Sure. So those protocols will kick in for the safety of everybody. At Tidal Health out in Salisbury, our guards are armed, but they know that there are places in the emergency department, for example, they can't carry the weapon, so they have protocols to cover that sort of stuff.
Thank you. Can you speak to anybody on the panel, maybe speak to also, when you talked about assaults, can you talk about like what type of assaults are they used with a weapon? Is this like a...
Very quickly, it's everything. I've taken knives, guns. I had one gentleman grab my glasses off my face, snap them. Somebody had given him a thermos, he took the top off and he tried to slash me with that. So it's pretty much anything that they can get their hands on.
Thank you.
And I'd say, Delegate, if you've seen as a protective services officer, many times it doesn't even involve a weapon. Their hands, their feet, they spit. And that can cause irreparable damage to somebody with infectious disease. So anything that a person can get their hands on that wants to intentionally harm, they'll get it.
Sure, just the last one. So dealing with that, and I know with hospitals, so we have an increase. We often talk about mental health. And so one of the things that I know when it comes to our vets, in which I've seen incidents where vets have presented to hospitals with mental health related issues, and then they get diagnosed, but during that process, they become very violent to the nursing staff, and they kind of can overtake a security guard or a nurse and staff, and we've had those incidents as well. Is there any concern about how we're working with veteran services or vets around the healthcare services?
So we have a very unique identifier when a veteran checks into our hospital. We actually ask them, are you a veteran or have served? And we identify that person in their chart. It's kind of like reading the room ahead of time. Sure. So you know that there may be a propensity. If this person is there, that something could trigger them if they, or not. But we do identify that possibility at the beginning. So the nurses, the providers, they have an idea of perhaps this could be a possibility with this patient. But many of the patients, they're so vulnerable because the first time you meet them, you have no information about their background at all. But we identify the veterans when they register.
Thank you.
And Delegate Simmons, briefly, I would say the issues of competency, we would still consider those when going forward. Sure. This is more people being irritated in the emergency room, collaterals, visitors, not being patient with doctors. Sometimes that aggression can lead to violence. We want to make sure we protect our medical providers.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm going to make a request because the timing is short. Please just one person answer this question. You can choose who to do it. And if you could do it in 90 seconds, that'd be great too. My question is, first of all, Holy Cross is in my district, so welcome to Annapolis, sir. My question though is, the Disability Rights Maryland in their info letter seems to suggest that some of the behaviors exhibited by people with disabilities at a hospital are a manifestation of their disability, and this bill would in some ways be criminalizing disability. And so I was just wondering if you had a response to that.
Thank you, Delegate. I would say when prosecutors look at these things, they would look at that just like with any other crime. When people have disability, the criminal justice system takes that into account when they look at the intent behind why a crime was committed. And they would also look at whether or not the person is even competent, and if they were competent at the time that the alleged crime would have taken place. So I believe that our current criminal justice system and current structure of laws address the concerns that are raised in the Disability Rights of Maryland letter of information, because if it's a reflection of their disease and it was involuntary, or they were not competent or criminally responsible for what they were doing, then the enhanced penalties, in my opinion, wouldn't apply to them.
Seeing no further questions, we thank you all very much. We're going to move on to the next panel. Zainab Chaudhry, Alexis Webster, Caroline Doyle, Jane Cranky, Shakira Cardi Mitchell, Teresa Wiley. Virtually, Angelica Ferraro is not there. Just have to add a chair and we'll, right. Beginning from my right and working across, please, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Kimberly Suardi. I'm here on behalf of the Council on American Islamic Relations. This legislation enhances protections for vulnerable individuals by establishing increased penalties for crimes of violence committed within medical facilities and places of worship. At a time when hate-motivated harassment and violence is on the rise nationwide, ensuring the safety of Marylanders in these spaces is a necessity. Medical facilities and places of worship are intended to be sanctuaries, places where individuals seek healing and spiritual fulfillment. Unfortunately, these spaces have increasingly become targets of violence, including hate crimes and mass shootings. Hate crimes have been on the rise. FBI data consistently demonstrates that hate crimes targeting religious institutions, healthcare facilities, and minority communities have escalated in recent years. Black, Muslim, Jewish, and other marginalized communities continue to face threats while engaging in religious or community activities. Medical workers and patients should also not fear for their lives while receiving or providing essential healthcare services. CARE respectfully urges you all to pass HB 1308 to send a clear message. Places of healing and worship must remain safe from violence and hate. Maryland should take decisive action to protect its most sacred spaces and ensure that all individuals, regardless of faith, background, or circumstance, can practice their faith and receive medical care without fear. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, and committee members. My name is Caroline Doyle, and I am testifying on behalf of myself, a Maryland emergency nurse, in favor of HB 1308, crime of violence, medical facilities, and places of worship penalty. When I was a little girl, I was taught that places of worship and medical facilities, particularly hospitals, were sacred places. They were havens and safe places for those seeking spiritual and medical help free of violence. When I was 15 years old, I entered into healthcare as a candy striper. I remember people coming into the hospital dressed in their Sunday best and with respect for the sacred place that it was. People were respectful and peaceful within the hospital setting. Over the past 43 years in healthcare, 34 of those of me being an emergency department nurse in Baltimore City have witnessed firsthand the increased violence that is so prevalent in our society that has spilled over into our hospitals and medical facilities. Violence in medical facilities has become a commonplace occurrence. We have all seen and heard about the recent events in Pennsylvania and Florida in the media. What we haven't heard are the countless stories of healthcare workers being verbally and physically assaulted while providing or attempting to provide care to our patients on a daily basis, or patients that are assaulted by other patients. So many stories don't make it into the headlines. I realize that patients presenting to our emergency departments are usually coming in on their worst days. All of our healthcare workers are there, ready and willing to provide the care that the patients and families needed. We can understand the concerns and frustrations of patients, family members, and loved ones in emergency and crisis situations. What we cannot understand nor accept is the violence that has become too prevalent in our medical facilities. This violence not only endangers the safety of healthcare workers, but patients and visitors as well. It interferes with patient care and can cause detrimental delays. I don't think any of us can or should accept this. We need to say enough is enough, and we will have zero tolerance to violent behavior. And HB 1308 would reestablish the respect for this sacred place. And I would like to thank the sponsors for this common sense bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. It is a privilege to be here today. My name is Alexis Webster, and I am the Senior Nursing Director at Holy Cross Health. With over 13 years' experience as a registered nurse in emergency medicine, I speak today not only as a healthcare leader, but as a representative of thousands of healthcare workers across the nation who face violence in their workplace every single day. I am here to testify in strong support of House Bill 1308. As a nurse leader, my staff turn to me for guidance and support. I am committed to their well-being just as I am to our patients and their families. But when the safety of my team is threatened, when they are subjected to violence in the very environment meant for healing, I feel helpless. Imagine witnessing a violent attack and the only response you can offer is the same standard protocol your organization has put in place for workplace violence. I was forced to confront this helplessness firsthand when one of my nurses was attacked by a patient simply upset with the care she was receiving in the emergency department. The violence was both brutal and personal. The nurse suffered a torn rotator cuff requiring surgery. She was also physically dragged to the ground by her hair, which caused a significant hair loss and led her to cut the remaining strands off, forever altering her appearance. The emotional toll on this nurse cannot be overstated. She faced financial hardship from unexpected medical bills and lost wages, but the most profound and lasting impact was the deep emotional distress. Upon returning to work, she found herself unable to care for patients, consumed by fear of another violent incident. This is the reality that too many of us in healthcare face. Healthcare workers are increasingly subjected to violent behavior, often in silence and with little recourse. By passing House Bill 1308, we will send a clear message that violence against those who care for others is unlawful and it has consequences. Thank you for your time. Chairperson Kippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, and committee members, good afternoon. My name is Shakira Carty-Mitchell, a registered nurse working at Holy Cross Hospital and Emergency Room in Silver Spring. I stand in favor of House Bill 1308. Over the past few years, the hostility towards healthcare workers have been unlike anything we have seen in the past. I cannot begin to tell you about the countless times we nurses have been verbally and physically abused by members of the community, the same people we serve. We have been spat on, had objects thrown at us, even things such as urine, feces, and blood. I have watched as one of my coworkers attempted to care for a patient who, when not satisfied, pushed her, causing her to fall, sustaining a serious back fracture. She is now on long-term disability. Another of my coworkers had her stethoscope around her neck, getting ready to assess a patient when the patient tugged on the stethoscope and tried to strangle her. Thankfully, another coworker ran to her rescue. Then there was the new grad nurse who just got off orientation and had her breast aggressively grabbed by a patient. When did this become an acceptable act towards healthcare workers? When did we deem it okay for healthcare workers to continuously be abused by people they are trying to help? I beseech you today to think closely about your decision. Help us. We need to be protected. We're trained to provide the highest quality care to others. We're not trained to be prison guards. We want the hospital to be a sacred place, a place of healing,
where patients can come and get the treatment they need, and a place where healthcare workers can go to work and help people and not be hurt or lose their lives or livelihoods. Please allow us to do our jobs and not live in fear. Please allow us to still want to be able to work in the field when you come to see us as a patient. Help us to create an atmosphere where patients and their families know that in Maryland, the hospital is a place where violence is never tolerated. We need your support in creating a calming environment for our staff and for the patients we serve. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair and all committee members. My name is Tess Wiley. I'm a registered nurse at Holy Cross Germantown. I'm here in support of Bill 1308. I have been a nurse for 20 years. I have personally witnessed increasing violence against healthcare workers. During my career, I have been kicked, pushed into a wall, bitten, spit on, and had my life threatened on multiple occasions. I could give you many examples of the horrific violence I have seen, but due to the time limit, I'll give you one particularly traumatic event. On January 25th, 2022, I was working as charge nurse in the emergency room when a patient was brought in from a local correctional facility. He was accompanied by 2 police officers, but that did not stop him from causing violence. While in the ER, he went to the restroom and pretended to pass out. A nurse went into the restroom to assist, and then he attacked. He pushed an officer onto the floor and slammed her head into the toilet and jumped on top of her. He had his hand on her weapon and released the snaps on her gun holster. I stood at the door of the bathroom feeling helpless, trying to pull at his legs to get him off the officer. Seeing his hand on the weapon, I prayed that he would not get the gun and start shooting. Thankfully, an off-duty officer working at the hospital as security bravely jumped on his back and got his hand off the gun. When Montgomery County Police arrived, it took 6 officers to remove this man from the bathroom. I drove home in tears that day. If the events of that day had unfolded differently, my children may no longer have a mother. I had thoughts of leaving nursing because it is too dangerous. Hospitals should not be an unsafe place. With a recent fatal shooting in York, Pennsylvania, another vicious attack on a nurse in Florida, it is not a question of if a healthcare worker in Maryland could be killed or critically injured, but when. We all went into healthcare field to help others, but feel that no one is there to protect us. Please consider passing this bill so that healthcare workers feel protected and we feel that our community has our back. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, and members of the committee. My name is Jane Krinke. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Hospital Association. We really appreciate Delegate Alston bringing this bill forward and commend her efforts to support the healthcare workforce. I also want to just thank this panel for sharing your personal stories and for the care that you give Marylanders every day. Last year, we surveyed 32 of our hospitals about the number of incidents of violence they were seeing over just a 6-month period of time, and they reported more than 1,800 incidents of varying levels of violence. Hospitals have taken many steps to try to address and prevent violence. Everything imaginable from supporting a public awareness campaign to try to humanize the healthcare workforce, to investing in training, 24/7 security, capital investments, post-incident counseling, court and accompaniment, you name it, they're doing it. So we view House Bill 1308 as a crucial part of the solution of addressing workplace violence. And along with spreading the word through those in your community and passing 1308, we would like to invite this committee to work with us also to explore additional ways to support the healthcare workforce. Because you heard there's also these lower levels of assault that healthcare workers are facing every day, and we really need your help. House Bill 1308 sends a clear and necessary message that acts of violence in sacred places like hospitals and places of worship will not be tolerated. Hospitals should be places where you can come and receive healing and hope and rest. No healthcare worker should have to choose between their safety and taking care of people. You've heard there's a lot of passion for healthcare workers, and we need to create spaces where they can do their job and care for the people in our communities. So for those reasons, we ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1308, and happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Is Ms. Pereira there? Questions? Seeing none, thank you all very much. I'm going to go now to one person who's testifying favorable with amendment, Abigail Snyder.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Abby Snyder, Director of Government Relations for the Baltimore Jewish Council, which represents the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, its agencies, and the Jewish community of the greater Baltimore region. I'll be brief because we really do appreciate the intent of this bill, and we think that it is incredibly important. We're just looking for a small language tweak, if the committee is amenable. On page 2, line 5, where it defines places of worship, it says non-residential locations, and within the Jewish faith, specifically in the Hasidic community, a lot of the worship that occurs there is done in what is called a Chabad house, which is basically where the rabbi lives, and they will hold their services kind of in their living room space. And there's a little bit more detail about what that looks like in my written testimony. I'm no legal expert, so I understand the intention of that is so that, you know, you can't say that when I'm sitting with my mom and dad in my house praying, that's a place of worship. So I don't know necessarily that striking non-residential is the way to go, but I'll put the trust in you all committee members to figure out the appropriate language. We just like to make sure that that's clarified for that part of our community.
Cool. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
That concludes the testimony on Delegate Alston's bill. We're going to go to House Bill 1452 with 20 minutes to go. People who are here looking for a voting session, I believe we're coming after the second session now. So we'll see anybody here for a voting session afterwards. However, we have a committee amendment that we will consider before we go to the floor tonight. Delegate Vogel, House Bill 1452. Jennifer Frederick, Cleveland Horton, Ronnie Taylor is virtual, and Colonel Lilly, who's also virtual. Delegate Vogel's not here.
Yeah, hello, Chairman.
Go ahead.
For the record, my name is Mateo Garcia Arauz Frazier. Unfortunately, Delegate Vogel has voting session at the moment, but I'll be testifying on his behalf. Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, and members of the Judiciary Committee. HB 1452 is legislation based on the recommendations of the Commission on Hate Crime Response and Prevention established 2 years ago by the work of this committee. The legislation proposes clearly defining hate bias incident in statute and altering the definition of sexual orientation. These legislative recommendations were included in the Commission's first annual report, which was legislatively mandated. They concluded that the first and most critical recommendation is to clearly define a hate bias incident and to provide a new definition that would be able to grow with society's understanding of sexual orientation. The Commission's first annual report has been included into the testimony for the record. I urge the committee to give a favorable report on HB 1452.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Frederick with the Maryland Office of the Attorney General, and I serve as counsel to the Maryland Commission on Hate Crime Response and Prevention. The Office of the Attorney General and the Commission support this bill as it reflects the two recommendations made in the Commission's first annual report. In recent years, we've seen a sharp rise in hate crimes and hate bias incidents, but we know these incidents continue to be underreported. In focusing on improving the reporting of hate crimes and hate bias incidents, there's a need for everyone to start with the same definitions of the term hate bias incident. Maryland has tracked hate bias incidents for decades, but the law has remained silent on what exactly a hate bias incident is. By explaining the non-criminal behavior that constitutes a hate bias incident under this law, law enforcement and the public across the state will have the same information and understanding about what incidents need to be reported. In turn, this will give everyone a better understanding of the state of hate in Maryland when the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center's yearly report comes out. Additionally, this bill will update the definition of sexual orientation in our hate crime statutes. Updating this language would adjust the current law to be broad enough to reflect the current understanding of sexual orientation and how language around individual identities continues to change. Current law defines sexual orientation as the identification of an individual as to male or female homosexuality, heterosexuality, or bisexuality. This leaves out intersex, non-binary, asexual, pansexual, and many other individuals who could be targets of hate because of their sexual orientation. The proposed definition would be more encompassing of all orientations by stating an individual's identity or another's perception of an individual's identity in relation to the gender or genders of which the individual is sexually or emotionally attracted. This new definition would encompass all existing sexual orientation identities and provides clearer long-term protections for all Marylanders. For these reasons, we support 1452 and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, and members of the House Judiciary Committee. My name is Cleveland Horton II. I do have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And I do want to thank each of you for the opportunity to testify today in strong support of House Bill 1152. House Bill 1152 is more than just legislation. It is a necessary and urgent response to the alarming rise in hate crimes and bias-related incidents in our communities. Hate in any form has no place in Maryland. By refining the definitions of sexual orientation and hate bias incidents, this bill ensures that our laws accurately reflect the lived experiences of those targeted by hate and discrimination. It provides the clarity needed to protect the most vulnerable among us and holds perpetrators accountable. A critical component of this bill is its emphasis on defining hate bias incidents. We know that hate does not always begin with violent crimes. It often starts with bias-driven harassment, intimidation, and threats that go unreported or unaddressed. When these incidents are not taken seriously, they create an environment where hate can escalate, and in many cases, hate bias incidents evolve into full-fledged hate crimes. By ensuring that hate bias incidents are clearly defined and tracked, we can intervene early, provide support to impact the communities, and prevent violence before it occurs. Every day, my team and I witness the devastating effects of hate-fueled violence and bias-motivated actions. We hear from individuals whose sense of safety has been shattered simply because of who they are, who they love, or how they identify. These acts do not just harm individuals. They instill fear, divide communities, and weaken the very fabric of our society. House Bill 1152 strengthens our ability to confront and combat these injustices head-on. For these reasons, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights urges a favorable vote on House Bill 1452. Thank you.
Ronnie Taylor, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Bartlett, and esteemed members of the Judiciary Committee. For the record, my name is Ronnie Taylor, and I serve as the Advocacy, Policy, and Partnerships Director at Free State Justice. We fight every day to remove legal and systematic barriers for the LGBTQIA+ individuals in Maryland, and I am here today in strong support of House Bill 1452. Hate crimes just don't harm individuals. They destabilize entire communities. Maryland's current definition of sexual orientation is outdated and fails to fully capture the people it's meant to protect. House Bill 1452 ensures that the law is clear. A person's sexual orientation is not up for interpretation, and their safety should not be conditional on how others perceive them. This bill also introduces a critical definition of hate bias incidents, acknowledging that not all acts of hate meet the legal threshold of a crime, but they still erode public safety. Slurs, threats, and targeted harassment are precursors to violence. Ignoring them leaves communities vulnerable. Law enforcement, policymakers, and advocates cannot address what is not properly documented. By updating our legal definitions, House Bill 1452 enables Maryland to collect accurate data, allocate resources effectively, and align our laws with federal standards, ensuring that our response to hate is comprehensive and not reactive. I urge you to issue a favorable report on House Bill 1452. Maryland must be a state where every resident is protected, seen, and valued under the law. Thank you.
Questions? All right, seeing none. Hello, Delegate Vogel. You did a very good job.
Good bill.
Great. Seeing no questions, thank you all very much, and that'll conclude the testimony. Wait, what happened? Oh, the other witness came back. All right, we're going to hear from the other witness then. This is Colonel Lilly.
Yes.
Go ahead.
How are you?
Fine. Go ahead for 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, we know what the bill does do. You know, it defines hate bias incidents, as well as update the definition of sexual orientation itself. After doing this profession for like 30 years, like with anything, what I would say is that we all have to do physicals when we're looking at the work that we do, we still have to do a physical work too and go back and look at anything that needs to be re-examined at any point in time so we can try to move forward with it. And this is no exception to that. It'll allow us to actually put in something that's consistent and congruent across the board for all of us, as opposed to looking at some of the individual things that we do as agencies. Maryland already requires us to collect some of the report for hate bias incidents, and this just actually helps us put things in a way that takes some of the ambiguity out of it and allow us to actually put some type of activity that must be reported under the Maryland law as it currently is. And sometimes it's inconsistent in implementation across the law, so it gives us some level of congruency, no matter what agency is. That is the envy that I have of the fire department, because they can leave here and go to California and everything stays the same. And this will kind of allow us to have some congruency with that.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on Delegate Vogel's bill. Committee, we're going to come back after the second session. I had a hope that we could get going and get it done in time before, but it's hopes and dreams, I guess. So we're going to anticipate coming back here 30 minutes after the end of the second session, which I'm going to anticipate is going to be around 7:30. So until then, this has been the House Judiciary Committee. We'll be back in a couple hours.